To the Honorable Lorenzo di Piero de' Medici. Many who seek favor with a prince often present him with things they consider precious or know to bring him joy, such as horses, weapons, fine garments, jewels, and other luxuries befitting his stature. In my desire to express my devotion to you, I searched among my possessions for something dear to me, and nothing holds as much value in my eyes as the knowledge I have gained from observing the actions of great men, both in my own time and in history. After much reflection and diligent study, I have condensed this knowledge into a small volume, which I now offer to you, esteemed Lorenzo. Though I may consider this work humble, I trust in your generosity to find it worthy of your attention. I cannot think of a better gift than to share with you all that I have learned over the years, despite the trials and dangers I have faced. I have not adorned this work with flowery language or grandiose phrases, nor have I added any unnecessary embellishments, as some are wont to do with their writings. My aim is for the truth and importance of the subject matter to speak for itself. I do not agree with those who believe it presumptuous for someone of humble origins to discuss matters concerning princes. Just as artists who wish to depict mountains must view them from the lowlands, and those who wish to understand the plains must observe them from high mountains, so too must one be a prince to understand the nature of the people, and be of the people to understand the nature of princes. Accept this humble offering in the spirit in which it is given. If you carefully read and contemplate its contents, you will discern my fervent hope for your attainment of the greatness that both your fortune and your inherent qualities promise. And should you ever cast your gaze down from your lofty heights, you will see how undeservedly I endure the continuous trials of fate. Your humble servant, Niccolò Machiavelli. The Prince. Chapter 1. There are two main types of states or powers that have historically governed people: republics and principalities. Principalities can be further categorized into two types: hereditary and new. Hereditary principalities are those where a family has ruled for generations, maintaining a long-established presence. On the other hand, new principalities are either completely fresh entities, like Milan under Francesco Sforza's rule, or they are territories annexed to an existing hereditary state, such as when the Kingdom of Naples became part of the King of Spain's domain. These newly acquired dominions may have populations accustomed to princely rule, or used to living freely. Furthermore, they can be obtained through the prince's own military conquests, the efforts of others, or simply by chance or skill. Chapter 2. I'll skip the discussion on republics, as I've covered that topic extensively elsewhere, and focus solely on principalities. Following the outlined order, I'll discuss how to govern and maintain such principalities. Firstly, it's generally easier to maintain control over hereditary states, especially those long accustomed to the rule of a particular family, compared to newly acquired ones. In hereditary states, a prince of average ability can typically maintain power by simply adhering to the customs of their ancestors and handling circumstances prudently as they arise. Barring extraordinary and overwhelming force, such a prince can usually retain control of their state. And if they are temporarily ousted, they often have a good chance of regaining power when misfortune befalls the usurper. Take, for example, the Duke of Ferrara in Italy. Despite facing attacks from the Venetians in 84 and Pope Julius in 10, he managed to hold his ground because of the long-standing establishment of his dominion. A hereditary prince has less incentive to offend their subjects, which generally leads to greater loyalty and support. As long as the prince avoids egregious wrongdoing, it's reasonable to expect that their subjects will naturally be well disposed toward them. Additionally, the longer a prince has ruled, the more the memories and motivations for change fade away, as people become accustomed to the status quo, making it harder for discontent to gain traction. Chapter 3. The challenges intensify in a new principality, especially if it's not entirely fresh but rather a part of a composite state. In such cases, the primary difficulties stem from the inherent nature of new principalities. People are often eager to replace their rulers, hoping for improvement, and this optimism drives them to rebel against the current authority. However, they soon realize, through experience, that their situation has worsened rather than improved. Additionally, a new prince typically burdens the inhabitants of the newly acquired territory with his military presence and numerous other hardships. This breeds resentment among those who have been subjugated, leading to a multitude of enemies. Furthermore, the prince struggles to retain the loyalty of those who initially supported his ascension because he fails to meet their expectations. Consequently, the prince finds himself unable to take firm action against these dissidents, as he feels indebted to them for their initial support. Even with considerable military might, a prince entering a new territory still relies heavily on the goodwill of the local populace. Louis XII, King of France, swiftly seized control of Milan, only to lose it just as quickly. The first time, it was simply a matter of Lodovico's own forces ousting him, as those who had initially welcomed the French king grew disillusioned with his rule. After all, their expectations of benefiting from his reign were dashed, and they refused to endure his mistreatment. It's indeed true that rebellious provinces are not as easily lost a second time, as the prince seizes the opportunity to punish dissenters, weed out suspected troublemakers, and fortify vulnerable areas. Hence, when France lost Milan for the first time, it only took Lodovico inciting insurrections on the borders. However, to lose it a second time, the entire world needed to unite against him, and his armies had to be defeated and expelled from Italy, outcomes stemming from the aforementioned causes. Despite this, Milan slipped from France's grasp on both occasions. While the reasons for the first loss have been outlined, we must now examine those for the second. We'll explore the resources at his disposal and consider what anyone in his position could have done to maintain control more effectively than the King of France. Nowadays, when a ruler adds new territories to an existing state, those territories are either of the same country and language or they're not. If they are, it's generally easier to maintain control, especially if the people there aren't used to governing themselves. In such cases, simply eliminating the ruling family is often enough to ensure stability. We've seen this in regions like Brittany, Burgundy, Gascony, and Normandy, which have long been part of France. Despite potential differences in language, the shared customs allow for peaceful coexistence, and the annexing ruler only needs to remember two things: that the former ruling family is gone and that the laws and taxes remain unchanged. Eventually, the new territories will blend seamlessly with the old. However, when states are acquired in a region with different languages, customs, or laws, it's much more challenging to maintain control. Success requires both luck and significant effort, with one key strategy being for the acquiring ruler to reside in the new territories. This not only strengthens their position but also allows for more immediate response to any issues that arise. Take, for example, the case of the Ottoman Empire in Greece. Settling there was crucial for maintaining control. Being on the ground enables rulers to address problems as they emerge, preventing them from escalating. Additionally, when the ruler is present, corruption is reduced, and the subjects have more direct access to leadership. As a result, they're more inclined to love or fear the ruler, making it harder for external forces to challenge the state as long as the ruler remains in residence. A more effective approach is to establish colonies in one or two strategic locations, essentially serving as keys to the state. This is necessary either in conjunction with maintaining a large military presence or as an alternative to it. Establishing colonies is cost-effective for a prince, as it requires minimal expense to send them out and maintain them. The minority of citizens who may be offended by the appropriation of land and houses for the new settlers are rendered powerless and scattered, unable to pose a threat. The majority, left unharmed, are incentivized to remain loyal, fearing the same fate as those who were dispossessed. In summary, colonies are economical, loyal, and cause minimal harm, particularly as the aggrieved are unable to retaliate effectively. It's essential to note that individuals should either be treated well or decisively subdued, as they can seek vengeance for minor grievances but not for more significant ones. Therefore, any injury inflicted should be severe enough to deter reprisal. Maintaining a standing military force instead of colonies is far costlier, requiring substantial resources to sustain. The expenses incurred by the garrison often exceed the state's income, resulting in a net loss. Additionally, the presence of armed forces throughout the state breeds resentment among the populace, as they all suffer the consequences of military occupation. Constantly shifting the garrison exacerbates these hardships, fostering widespread hostility. These antagonistic forces, while subdued in their own territory, retain the capacity to cause harm. Consequently, armed guards are largely ineffective compared to the beneficial role fulfilled by colonies. Once more, a prince governing a country with such differences should position himself as the leader and protector of his weaker neighbors while simultaneously undermining the strength of the more powerful ones. He must ensure that no foreign power, as formidable as himself, gains a foothold there by any means. History demonstrates that discontented individuals, driven by excessive ambition or fear, often invite powerful foreigners into their lands. The Romans, for instance, were invited into Greece by the Aetolians, and similar scenarios played out in other regions where they established a presence. Typically, when a powerful foreign force enters a country, the subject states gravitate toward it due to their animosity toward the ruling authority. Thus, the conqueror need not exert much effort to win them over, as they swiftly align with the new power. However, the conqueror must prevent these subject states from amassing excessive power and authority. With his own forces and their allegiance, he can easily subdue the more potent states and maintain control over the entire country. Failure to manage this aspect of governance effectively will result in the loss of acquired territory. Even while in possession of it, the ruler will face endless challenges and conflicts. The Romans, in their conquests, carefully implemented these strategies. They established colonies, maintained friendly ties with smaller powers without bolstering their strength, subdued the stronger ones, and prevented formidable foreign powers from gaining control. Greece serves as a prime example. The Romans kept the Achaeans and Aetolians as allies, subdued Macedonia, and expelled Antiochus. However, they never allowed the Achaeans or Aetolians to expand their influence, nor did they befriend Philip without first subduing him, or allow Antiochus to retain authority over any territory. These actions by the Romans exemplified the prudent approach that all wise rulers should adopt. They must not only address current challenges but also anticipate and prepare for future ones. When troubles are foreseen, they can be swiftly remedied. However, if left unaddressed, they grow into insurmountable problems, akin to a disease progressing from being difficult to detect to becoming incurable. The Romans, with their foresight, dealt with issues proactively. They preferred to confront conflicts immediately rather than allowing them to escalate, knowing that delaying war only benefits others. They strategically chose to face adversaries like Philip and Antiochus in Greece to avoid conflict in Italy. They could have avoided both conflicts altogether, but they chose not to pursue such short-term pleasures. Instead, they valued the rewards of their own courage and foresight over the fleeting benefits of the moment. Time, with its ability to bring both good and evil, must be met with proactive measures rather than passive enjoyment. But let's focus on France and examine its actions in light of the mentioned principles. I'll specifically discuss Louis, as he held sway over Italy for the longest period, contrasting his conduct with what's advisable for maintaining a diverse state. Louis's entry into Italy was spurred by Venetian ambition, seeking to claim half of Lombardy through his intervention. I won't fault the king for this, as he aimed to establish a foothold in Italy, lacking allies due to Charles's previous actions. He had to accept whatever friendships he could secure, and he would have succeeded swiftly if not for some missteps. Nonetheless, upon acquiring Lombardy, Louis swiftly regained the authority Charles had lost. Genoa yielded, the Florentines allied with him, and numerous other Italian powers sought his friendship, including the Marquis of Mantua, the Duke of Ferrara, and many others. This turn of events made it evident to the Venetians the folly of their actions, as their pursuit of 2 towns in Lombardy inadvertently granted the king control over 2/3 of Italy. Consider how easily the king could have secured his position in Italy if he had followed the rules outlined above and protected all his allies. Despite their numbers, they were weak and fearful, easily swayed by concerns about the church or the Venetians. Thus, they would have been compelled to stand by him, allowing him to easily defend against any remaining powerful adversaries. However, upon arriving in Milan, he acted contrary to this by assisting Pope Alexander in occupying the Romagna. He failed to realize that this weakened his own position, alienating potential allies and strengthening the Church's temporal power, thereby enhancing its authority. This initial mistake forced him into a series of further errors, ultimately leading him to intervene in Italy to counteract Alexander's ambitions and prevent him from dominating Tuscany. Moreover, instead of consolidating his power, he sought to share the kingdom of Naples with the King of Spain. By relinquishing his sole authority in Italy, he provided a refuge for the ambitious and discontented, both from Italy and within his own realm. Instead of leaving his own nominee as King of Naples, he ousted him in favor of someone who ultimately had the power to depose him, Louis, from the region. The desire to acquire is indeed natural and widespread, and individuals will pursue it whenever possible, a pursuit that merits praise rather than criticism. However, when one seeks to acquire by any means despite incapacity to do so, folly and blame ensue. Therefore, if France had possessed the capability to attack Naples with its own forces, it should have done so. If not, then dividing it was unwarranted. While the partition with the Venetians in Lombardy could be justified as providing a foothold in Italy, the division of Naples lacked such necessity, and thus deserved criticism. Louis committed 5 errors. He weakened smaller powers, bolstered the strength of a major power in Italy, invited a foreign power, failed to establish residence in the country, and neglected to send colonies. These errors alone might not have been detrimental had he not made a 6th error by stripping territories from the Venetians. Given his prior actions of empowering the Church and involving Spain in Italy, it was unreasonable and unnecessary to further undermine the Venetians. Their strength would have deterred others from encroaching on Lombardy, and they would not have consented to losing their position without seeking dominance themselves. Additionally, others would have hesitated to take Lombardy from France to hand it over to the Venetians, as it would have been counter to their interests and lacked sufficient courage. If someone were to argue that King Louis surrendered the Romagna to Alexander and the kingdom to Spain to avoid war, I would counter that no blunder should ever be committed to evade war, as it cannot be indefinitely avoided and will only be postponed to one's detriment. As for the pledge Louis made to the Pope in exchange for assistance in his endeavors, including the dissolution of his marriage and the appointment of the Archbishop of Rouen, I will address the issue of princely faithfulness later on, emphasizing the importance of upholding such commitments. King Louis's loss of Lombardy stemmed from his failure to adhere to the principles commonly observed by those who acquire and seek to retain territories. There is no miracle in this outcome. It is entirely reasonable and natural. I discussed these matters in knots with Rouen when Cesare Borgia, known as Valentino, occupied the Romagna. When Cardinal Rouen remarked that Italians did not grasp the art of war, I retorted that the French lacked understanding of statecraft, implying that they allowed the Church to attain excessive power. Indeed, it has been evident that France's actions contributed to the rise of the Church and Spain in Italy, while their downfall can be attributed to them. From this, a general principle emerges: those who facilitate another's ascent to power are ultimately ruined, as such dominance is achieved through cunning or force, both of which are distrusted by the newly empowered. Chapter 4. Considering the challenges individuals face in maintaining control over a newly acquired territory, some may question how Alexander the Great managed to conquer Asia in just a few years, and yet his successors, upon his death, faced minimal resistance from the empire's inhabitants, despite its recent conquest. One might assume that the entire empire would rebel. However, the successors of Alexander were able to retain their positions without encountering significant external threats, their only challenges arising from internal power struggles driven by personal ambitions. The principalities that history records were governed in 2 distinct manners. Firstly, there were those governed by a prince who relied on a body of servants to assist in ruling the kingdom. These servants acted as ministers, serving at the prince's pleasure and with his permission. Secondly, there were principalities governed by a prince alongside barons, whose authority stemmed from their ancient lineage rather than from the prince's favor. These barons held sway over their own territories and subjects, who regarded them as natural lords and held them in affection. In states governed by a prince and his servants, the prince commanded greater respect, as he was recognized as the supreme authority throughout the land. Any obedience shown to others was merely in the capacity of ministers and officials, rather than out of genuine affection or loyalty. In our contemporary world, the Turk and the King of France exemplify two distinct forms of government. The Turk's entire monarchy is centralized under one ruler, with all others serving as his subordinates. He divides his kingdom into administrative regions called sanjaks, appointing different administrators and freely changing them as he sees fit. On the other hand, the King of France finds himself surrounded by an established body of lords, recognized and cherished by their own subjects. These lords possess their own privileges, which the king cannot revoke without risking his own stability. Upon examining these two states, one can discern significant challenges in seizing control of the Turk's kingdom, but relative ease in maintaining it once conquered. The difficulties in capturing the Turk's kingdom stem from the inability of outside princes to instigate rebellion among those close to the ruler. This is due to the fact that the Turk's ministers, being essentially slaves, are not easily swayed and, even if corrupted, lack the ability to garner popular support, as discussed earlier. Therefore, anyone seeking to overthrow the Turk must understand that he will face a united front and must rely more on his own strength than on internal dissent. However, once the Turk's kingdom has been conquered and his armies decisively defeated, the conqueror need only concern himself with the ruler's family. With the ruling family eliminated, there are no other credible threats, as the remaining ministers lack influence over the people. Just as the conqueror did not depend on them before victory, he has no reason to fear them afterward. In kingdoms governed like that of France, the situation is quite different. Here, one can easily gain entry by winning over a baron of the kingdom, as there are always dissatisfied individuals seeking change. These discontented individuals can pave the way into the state and make victory seem attainable. However, the challenges arise after seizing power. Both those who aided in the conquest and those who were subdued present endless difficulties. Merely exterminating the prince's family is not sufficient because the remaining lords become leaders of new movements against you. Since you cannot satisfy or eliminate them, the state is inevitably lost when the opportunity arises. Consider the nature of Darius's government, which resembles that of the Turk's kingdom. Therefore, Alexander only needed to defeat Darius in battle and then seize control of the country. With Darius slain, Alexander's rule remained secure due to the aforementioned reasons. If his successors had remained united, they could have enjoyed secure and comfortable rule, as there were no internal uprisings in the kingdom except those they incited themselves. However, it's impossible to maintain such tranquility in states structured like that of France. This led to frequent rebellions against the Romans in Spain, France, and Greece, due to the numerous principalities within these states. As long as the memory of these principalities persisted, the Romans never had secure control. However, with the power and longevity of the empire, the memory faded, and the Romans eventually became secure rulers. Subsequently, when they fought among themselves, each was able to assert authority over their respective parts of the country, and with the former lords' families eliminated, only the Romans were recognized. Reflecting on these historical events, one shouldn't be surprised by Alexander's ease in holding the empire of Asia or the challenges faced by others in maintaining conquests, such as Pyrrhus and many others. This difficulty isn't due to the conqueror's lack or abundance of skill but rather the lack of uniformity in the subject state. Chapter 5. When dealing with states that were accustomed to autonomy and had their own laws, there are three approaches for those aiming to maintain control. The first is to dismantle them entirely, the second is to personally reside in the territory, and the third is to allow them to retain their laws while extracting tribute and establishing an oligarchy that remains loyal to you. This form of governance, instituted by the ruler, understands that it relies on the ruler's favor and support for its survival, thus actively working to uphold the ruler's interests. Therefore, maintaining control over a city accustomed to freedom is best achieved through the cooperation of its own citizens. Consider the cases of the Spartans and the Romans. The Spartans attempted to control Athens and Thebes by establishing oligarchies, yet they eventually lost these territories. On the other hand, the Romans, to maintain control over Capua, Carthage, and Numantia, chose to dismantle them, and they did not face subsequent loss. Similarly, the Romans aimed to govern Greece as the Spartans did, preserving its freedom and laws, but they failed in this endeavor. To maintain control, they were forced to dismantle many cities in the region, as there is no reliable method to retain them without resorting to ruin. A ruler who seizes a city accustomed to freedom but refrains from destroying it risks being overthrown by it. Such cities always rally around the ideals of liberty and their ancient privileges in times of rebellion, which they never forget regardless of time or benefits bestowed upon them. Even after being subjugated for 100 years by the Florentines, Pisa immediately reclaimed its spirit of liberty and privileges. However, when cities or countries are accustomed to princely rule and the ruling family is eliminated, they struggle to establish new leadership among themselves and lack the know-how to govern independently. Consequently, they are slow to take up arms, making it easier for a prince to gain control and secure their allegiance. In contrast, republics exhibit more vigor, greater animosity, and a stronger desire for revenge, never allowing the memory of their former liberty to fade. Therefore, the safest course of action is either to destroy such republics or to establish a permanent presence there. Chapter 6. Don't be surprised if, when discussing entirely new principalities as I'm about to, I draw upon the most exemplary cases of both princes and states. People, generally following paths already trodden by others and emulating their actions, still can't wholly replicate the achievements of those they imitate. A wise person should always emulate the strategies of great men, striving to mirror their supremacy. Even if they can't match their abilities, they should aim to echo them. Think of skilled archers aiming for a distant target. They don't aim directly at the mark but higher, using the elevation to hit their desired target. So, in entirely new principalities governed by a new prince, the difficulty of maintaining power varies depending on the prince's abilities or luck. When someone rises to power from obscurity, it implies they possess either skill or fortune, which can alleviate some challenges. However, those who rely less on luck tend to establish the strongest foundations. Additionally, it's advantageous if the prince has no other state to govern, as it compels them to reside there in person, which simplifies matters. When we look at those who, through their own abilities rather than luck, have risen to become princes, we find exemplary figures like Moses, Cyrus, Romulus, and Theseus. While discussing Moses might be a different matter, given his role as an executor of the will of God, he still deserves admiration for being deemed worthy to converse with the divine. Turning to Cyrus and others who established or acquired kingdoms, they all deserve admiration. Their deeds and conduct are no less commendable than those of Moses, despite his divine guidance. Upon examining their actions and lives, we see that they owed little to fortune beyond the opportunities it presented. These opportunities provided the material for them to shape into the forms they deemed best. Without those opportunities, their mental prowess might have gone unnoticed, and without their abilities, those opportunities would have been wasted. Thus, Moses found the Israelites enslaved in Egypt, which spurred them to follow him in seeking liberation. Romulus, abandoned at birth, rose to become the founder of Rome and its kingdom. Cyrus seized the opportunity presented by Persian discontent with Median rule and the softness of the Medes due to prolonged peace. Theseus, confronting a dispersed Athenian populace, showcased his abilities. These instances of opportunity and ability made these individuals fortunate, as they recognized and seized the chance to elevate and immortalize their nations. Those who ascend to power through valorous means, like these individuals, often face considerable challenges in acquiring a principality. However, once obtained, they tend to maintain it with relative ease. The difficulties in acquisition stem from the need to introduce new rules and methods to establish governance and security. It's crucial to recognize that there's nothing more daunting, perilous, or uncertain than spearheading the introduction of a new order. Innovators face opposition from those who thrived under the old system and tepid support from those who might benefit from the new one. This tepid response arises from both fear of legal reprisal from opponents and skepticism from people who are hesitant to embrace change without extensive evidence of its efficacy. Consequently, when adversaries seize the opportunity to attack, they do so with fervor, while lukewarm defenders put the prince and his rule at risk. To thoroughly examine this matter, we must determine whether these innovators can depend on themselves or if they need to rely on others. In other words, do they have to resort to persuasion or can they exert force to accomplish their goals? Those who rely on persuasion alone often fail miserably and achieve nothing substantial. However, when they can depend on themselves and exert force, they are rarely in jeopardy. This is why armed leaders tend to conquer, while unarmed ones meet destruction. Additionally, the nature of people is fickle. Although they are easily persuaded, it's challenging to sustain their belief. Therefore, it's essential to implement measures that allow for the use of force when persuasion fails to maintain belief. If Moses, Cyrus, Theseus, and Romulus had been unarmed, they wouldn't have been able to maintain their systems of governance for long. We saw a similar fate in our time with Fra Girolamo Savonarola, whose new order of things crumbled the moment the people stopped believing in him, and he had no means to retain the loyalty of believers or persuade the unbelievers. Hence, such individuals face significant challenges in realizing their vision, with most of their dangers lying in the initial stages. However, with skill and determination, they can overcome these obstacles. Once they have overcome these challenges and eliminated those who oppose their success, they earn respect and can enjoy power, security, honor, and happiness. To illustrate this point further, I'll mention a lesser-known example that still bears resemblance to the aforementioned figures: Hiero the Syracusan. He ascended from a humble position to become the Prince of Syracuse, owing everything to opportunity rather than luck. The oppressed Syracusans elected him as their leader, and he was later appointed as their prince in recognition of his leadership. Hiero exhibited remarkable ability even as a private citizen, with some even saying he only lacked a kingdom to be a king. He restructured the military, formed new alliances, and leveraged his soldiers and allies to build a strong foundation for his rule. While he faced considerable challenges in acquiring power, maintaining it proved relatively easier for him. Chapter 7. Those who ascend to princely status solely through good fortune, transitioning from private citizens to rulers, face little difficulty in their ascent but encounter significant challenges in maintaining their position. They may have no obstacles on the way up because they soar, but they encounter many upon reaching the summit. These are individuals who are given a state either through financial means or by the favor of the bestower. This was the case for many in Greece, particularly in the cities of Ionia and the Hellespont, where princes were appointed by Darius to govern cities for his own security and glory. Similarly, some emperors rose to power through the corruption of soldiers, transitioning from ordinary citizens to rulers. However, such rulers stand solely on the goodwill and fortune of their benefactor, two fickle and unreliable factors. Moreover, they often lack the necessary knowledge and skills for governance, as they have lived in a private capacity, and may not possess the ability to command. Additionally, they lack loyal forces to support them. States that rise unexpectedly, like all rapidly growing entities in nature, lack the stable foundations needed to withstand the first storm that comes their way. Unless those who unexpectedly become princes are exceptionally capable and understand the need to immediately secure their position, they are at risk of being overthrown. They must quickly establish the foundations that others laid before they became princes. Let's consider two examples from recent memory to illustrate these two methods of ascending to princely status: Francesco Sforza and Cesare Borgia. Francesco, through skillful means and remarkable ability, rose from a private individual to become Duke of Milan. He acquired his position with great effort but maintained it with relative ease. On the other hand, Cesare Borgia, known as Duke Valentino, gained his state during his father's reign of power. However, as his father's influence waned, Cesare lost his position despite his efforts to secure it. Despite employing all the strategies of a wise and capable leader to establish his rule firmly, he still faced downfall because he had not laid his foundations securely beforehand. It's essential to recognize that laying foundations after the fact, even with great skill, entails significant challenges and risks. Upon examining the Duke's actions, it becomes evident that he did indeed establish solid foundations for his future power. Therefore, it's worthwhile to analyze his methods, as there are few better lessons for a new prince than studying his example. If his efforts ultimately failed, it wasn't due to any fault of his own but rather the extreme unpredictability of fortune. Alexander VI faced numerous challenges in his efforts to elevate his son, the Duke. Firstly, he couldn't see a clear path to granting him control over any state outside the Church's domain. Additionally, if he attempted to seize Church territories, he knew the Duke of Milan and the Venetians would oppose him, as Faenza and Rimini were already under Venetian protection. Moreover, the arms of Italy, controlled by factions like the Orsini and the Colonnesi, were poised against the Pope's expansion. To secure his son's power, Alexander needed to disrupt this balance and incite conflict among the powers, allowing him to assert control over some of their territories. This task was made easier by the Venetians' desire to bring the French back into Italy for their own reasons. Alexander not only supported this but also facilitated it by annulling King Louis's previous marriage. With Venetian support, the French king entered Italy, and Alexander promptly provided him with troops for an assault on the Romagna. The Romagna surrendered to the king's reputation, enabling the Duke to seize control. However, as the Duke sought to expand further, he faced two obstacles: the loyalty of his own forces and the goodwill of France. He feared that the Orsini forces, which he relied on, might betray him or even seize his conquests for themselves. Additionally, he realized that the French king might also assert his own interests over the Duke's. These concerns were confirmed when the Orsini hesitated to attack Bologna and when the king prevented the Duke from invading Tuscany after capturing the Duchy of Urbino. Consequently, the Duke resolved to no longer rely on the arms and fortunes of others. To strengthen his position, the Duke took several strategic steps. Firstly, he weakened the Orsini and Colonnesi factions in Rome by winning over their supporters, appointing them to positions of honor and command, and paying them well. In a short time, he effectively dismantled the factions, turning their loyalty entirely toward himself. Then, seizing an opportunity to crush the Orsini, he capitalized on their realization that his rise threatened their own power. The Orsini convened a meeting in Perugia, leading to rebellion in Urbino and turmoil in the Romagna. Despite facing numerous dangers, the Duke prevailed with the aid of the French. Once he restored his authority, the Duke avoided reliance on external forces and instead employed his cunning. Through the mediation of Signor Pagolo, whom the Duke had won over with lavish attention and gifts, he brokered a reconciliation with the Orsini. Their naivety led them into his trap at Sinigalia, where he eliminated their leaders and converted their supporters into allies. With control over the Romagna and the Duchy of Urbino, and the people now favorably disposed toward him, the Duke laid solid foundations for his power. This strategic maneuvering serves as a noteworthy example for others to emulate. Upon taking control of the Romagna, the Duke encountered a region plagued by weak rulers who exploited their subjects rather than governing them. This fostered disunity, rampant crime, and violence. To restore order and obedience, the Duke appointed Messer Ramiro d'Orco, a swift and ruthless man, granting him extensive authority. Ramiro quickly achieved success in pacifying the region. However, the Duke recognized the dangers of granting unchecked power and feared Ramiro's growing unpopularity. Therefore, he established a court of justice, presided over by a fair and capable leader, to oversee the region. Seeking to distance himself from any past cruelty, the Duke orchestrated Ramiro's downfall. He publicly executed Ramiro, leaving his body in the town square of Cesena with a bloody knife beside it. This brutal spectacle simultaneously appeased and intimidated the populace, reinforcing the Duke's authority while absolving himself of blame. Let's circle back to where we began. The Duke, now feeling sufficiently fortified and having neutralized many immediate threats, turned his attention to France. He recognized that the king, belatedly realizing his error, would not offer support. Thus, the Duke sought new alliances and temporized with France, especially during their expedition to Naples against the besieging Spaniards at Gaeta. His aim was to secure himself against potential threats, a goal he could have swiftly achieved had Alexander lived. Regarding future concerns, the Duke feared a successor to the Church who might not favor him and could seek to undo Alexander's grants. To counter this, he devised a four-pronged strategy. First, he eliminated the families of the dispossessed lords to remove any pretext for papal interference. Second, he garnered support from the Roman gentlemen to have leverage over the Pope. Third, he worked to sway the College of Cardinals in his favor. And fourth, he aimed to amass enough power to withstand any initial challenges upon the Pope's demise. By Alexander's death, he had accomplished three of these objectives. He had eliminated most of the dispossessed lords, gained the loyalty of Roman gentlemen, and secured a significant faction in the College of Cardinals. Looking ahead, he planned to seize control of Tuscany, having already obtained Perugia and Piombino, with Pisa under his protection. With France no longer a concern due to their expulsion from Naples by the Spaniards, he swiftly moved to conquer Pisa. Subsequently, Lucca and Siena capitulated, driven by animosity towards Florence and fear of the Duke's growing influence. Had his fortunes continued to rise as they did in the year of Alexander's death, he would have become an independent power, relying solely on his own strength and cunning rather than external forces. But Alexander passed away 5 years after he first unsheathed the sword. He left the Duke with Romagna firmly in hand, while the rest of his dominions hung in uncertainty between two formidable enemy forces, all while he himself was gravely ill. Yet, despite these challenges, the Duke possessed such audacity and skill, and he understood so well how to sway people to his side or turn them against him. The foundations he had laid in such a short time were remarkably solid. If he hadn't been burdened by those armies or plagued by illness, he would have surmounted every obstacle. Indeed, his groundwork proved sturdy, as Romagna awaited him for over a month. Even in Rome, though barely clinging to life, he remained secure. Despite the Baglioni, the Vitelli, and the Orsini gathering in Rome, they couldn't threaten him. If he hadn't been in poor health when Alexander passed, the situation would have unfolded quite differently. On the day Julius II ascended to the papal throne, the Duke confided in me that he had prepared for every eventuality upon his father's demise, except for the unforeseen circumstance that he himself would be on death's door. When reflecting on all the Duke's actions, I find no reason to condemn him. Rather, it seems that I should hold him up as an example to all those who, by the fortune or military might of others, ascend to positions of power. With his lofty aspirations and far-reaching goals, he could not have conducted himself differently. Only the premature death of Alexander and his own illness thwarted his ambitions. Therefore, anyone who seeks to establish themselves securely in a new principality, to cultivate friendships, to overcome obstacles through force or cunning, to earn both love and fear from the people, to command the loyalty and respect of soldiers, to eliminate threats and reshape the existing order, to balance severity with generosity, to maintain alliances with kings and princes in a manner that secures their assistance while avoiding their resentment, will find no better example than the deeds of this man. The only fault that can be attributed to him is the election of Julius II, a decision that proved to be a misstep. Unable to install a pope of his own choosing, he could have prevented the election of any other candidate. He should never have consented to the election of a cardinal whom he had wronged, or who had reason to fear him if they were to become pontiffs. People harm others out of either fear or hatred. Among those he had wronged were San Pietro ad Vincula, Colonna, San Giorgio, and Ascanio. The rest, upon ascending to the papacy, had reason to fear him, with the exceptions of Rouen and the Spaniards, who were bound to him by familial and political ties. Therefore, above all else, the Duke should have supported the candidacy of a Spaniard for Pope, and failing that, he should have endorsed Rouen instead of San Pietro ad Vincula. Those who believe that new favors will make powerful figures forget old grievances are mistaken. Thus, the Duke erred in his choice, and it ultimately led to his downfall. Chapter 8. While there are two ways a prince can emerge from obscurity, either solely attributed to fortune nor genius, it's clear to me that I should not overlook them, even though one could delve deeper when discussing republics. These methods are either ascending to the principality through wicked or nefarious means, or becoming the leader of one's country by the favor of fellow citizens. Speaking of the first method, I'll illustrate it with two examples, one from antiquity, the other more recent, and I believe these examples will suffice for those who may find themselves compelled to follow a similar path. Agathocles, the Sicilian, rose to become the king of Syracuse from a humble and lowly background. Born the son of a potter, he led a life marked by infamy. Yet, he coupled his notoriety with remarkable mental and physical abilities. Devoting himself to the military, he climbed the ranks to become praetor of Syracuse. Once established, and with a deliberate intent to seize power for himself without owing anything to others, he struck a deal with Amilcar, the Carthaginian, who was leading an army in Sicily. One morning, under the guise of discussing matters of the Republic, Agathocles assembled the people and Senate of Syracuse. At a signal, his soldiers slaughtered the senators and wealthiest citizens. With them dead, he seized control of the city without inciting civil unrest. Despite being defeated twice by the Carthaginians and eventually besieged, he not only defended Syracuse but also led an offensive into Africa, lifting the siege of his city in a short time. The Carthaginians, facing dire circumstances, were forced to negotiate with Agathocles. They ceded Sicily to him, while contenting themselves with control over Africa. Therefore, anyone who examines the actions and character of this man will find little, if anything, attributable to fortune. He achieved greatness, as demonstrated earlier, not through the favor of others but through his own relentless advancement in the military, each step gained through countless trials and perils, and each firmly held despite numerous dangers. However, it cannot be deemed talent to betray fellow citizens, deceive friends, lack faith, mercy, or religion. Such methods may secure power but not glory. Yet, when considering Agathocles' courage in facing and extricating himself from dangers, along with his resilience in enduring and overcoming hardships, there is no reason why he should be esteemed less than the most renowned captain. Nevertheless, his barbaric cruelty and inhumanity, coupled with boundless wickedness, prevent him from being celebrated among the noblest men. His achievements cannot be ascribed to either fortune or genius. In our era, under the reign of Alexander VI, Alvarato da Fermo, orphaned many years earlier, was raised by his maternal uncle, Giovanni Fagliani. In his youth, he was sent to fight under Pagolo Vitelli, aiming to climb to a high position in the military through his mentorship. After Pagolo's death, he served under his brother Vitellozzo and quickly rose to prominence, possessing wit, a strong physique, and a sharp mind. However, feeling it beneath him to serve others, he resolved, with the support of certain citizens of Fermo who valued the subjugation of their city more than its freedom, and with assistance from the Vitelleschi family, to seize control of Fermo. He wrote to Giovanni Fagliani, expressing his desire to visit his hometown after many years away, under the pretext of inspecting his inheritance. Though he claimed to have pursued nothing but honor, he wished to arrive in a manner befitting his status, accompanied by 100 horsemen, his friends and followers. He urged Giovanni to ensure a grand reception by the people of Fermo, which would not only reflect well on him but also on Giovanni, who had raised him. Giovanni spared no effort in attending to his nephew, ensuring that Alvarado was received with honor by the people of Fermo and accommodated in his own residence. After spending several days there and making the necessary arrangements for his sinister plans, Alvarado hosted a lavish banquet, inviting Giovanni Fagliani and the prominent figures of Fermo. Following the completion of the meal and customary entertainment, Alvarado skillfully initiated serious discussions about the accomplishments of Pope Alexander and his son Cesare, engaging Giovanni and others in conversation. However, he abruptly suggested that such topics warranted a more private setting and led them to a chamber, where Giovanni and the other guests followed. Once seated, soldiers emerged from hidden corners and ruthlessly slaughtered Giovanni and the others. After the massacre, Alvarado mounted his horse and rode through the town, besieging the chief magistrate in the palace and forcing the fearful populace to submit to his authority. He established himself as the ruler, eliminating all dissenters who posed a threat and implementing new civil and military regulations. Consequently, during his reign, not only did he maintain control over the city of Fermo, but he also became a formidable adversary to neighboring regions. His downfall would have been as challenging as that of Agathocles had he not been outmaneuvered by Cesare Borgia, who captured him along with the Orsini and Vitelli at Sinigalia, as previously mentioned. Thus, 1 year after committing this act of treachery, Alvarado was executed by strangulation, alongside Vitellozzo, whom he had appointed as his chief lieutenant in both bravery and villainy. Some might question how individuals like Agathocles, despite their countless betrayals and brutalities, can live securely in their homeland for an extended period, defend themselves against external threats, and avoid internal conspiracies. Many others, even in times of peace, have failed to maintain control over their state, let alone during times of war, despite resorting to cruelty. I believe that the difference lies in how severity is wielded, whether it is used wisely or foolishly. Severities can be considered wisely used if, in a rare instance, they are applied decisively to ensure one's safety and are not perpetuated unless they can benefit the people. On the other hand, they are misused when, despite starting off sparingly, they multiply over time rather than diminish. Those who employ the former approach may, with the help of divine intervention or human assistance, soften their rule to some extent, as Agathocles managed to do. However, those who opt for the latter strategy will inevitably struggle to maintain their grip on power. Therefore, it's crucial for a usurper aiming to seize control of a state to carefully consider all the necessary injuries he must inflict and execute them all at once. By doing so, he avoids the need to repeat them daily, thus preventing constant upheaval among his subjects. Instead, he can reassure them and gain their loyalty through acts of kindness. Anyone who fails to follow this approach, whether due to fear or bad advice, will find themselves constantly wielding the knife of oppression. As a result, they cannot trust their subjects, nor can their subjects truly support them due to the ongoing mistreatment they endure. Injuries should be inflicted swiftly and decisively, minimizing their impact on the populace. Conversely, benefits should be distributed gradually, ensuring their positive effects endure. Above all, a prince must establish a consistent presence among his people, remaining steadfast regardless of the circumstances, whether they bring fortune or adversity. Waiting until troubled times arise to implement harsh measures is too late, and attempting leniency then will only be perceived as a forced gesture, garnering no genuine loyalty or obligation from the populace. Chapter 9. Now, turning to the scenario where a prominent citizen rises to become the ruler of his country, not through wickedness or extreme violence, but through the support of his fellow citizens, this can be termed a civil principality. In such cases, achieving this position doesn't necessarily require exceptional genius or luck, but rather a keen sense of opportunity. Here's how it typically unfolds. A civil principality arises from either the endorsement of the people or the backing of the nobles. In every city, these two distinct factions exist, each with its own desires. The people resist being governed or oppressed by the nobles, while the nobles seek to rule over and dominate the people. These conflicting desires lead to one of three outcomes in cities: the establishment of a principality, self-governance, or anarchy. A principality can be established either by the people or by the nobles, depending on who holds the advantage at the time. When the nobles realize they can't withstand the power of the people, they elevate one of their own to princely status, allowing them to pursue their ambitions under his leadership. Similarly, when the people find themselves unable to resist the nobles, they elevate one of their own to prince to gain protection under his authority. Maintaining power is more challenging for a prince who ascends with noble support, as he must contend with many who see themselves as his equals, making it difficult to govern to his liking. In contrast, a prince who gains sovereignty through popular support finds himself largely alone, with few unwilling to obey him. Moreover, while it's difficult to satisfy the nobles without causing harm to others, it's easier to appease the people, as their desires are generally more just. They simply wish not to be oppressed. Additionally, a prince can never fully safeguard himself against a hostile populace due to their sheer numbers, whereas he can more effectively manage the nobles, who are fewer in number. The worst a prince can expect from a hostile populace is abandonment, but from hostile nobles, he faces not only abandonment but also the threat of rebellion. Nobles, being more strategic and perceptive in such matters, often act preemptively to protect themselves and gain favor from the prince they expect to prevail. Furthermore, while a prince must continually interact with the same people, he can easily manipulate the nobles, granting or revoking their authority at will. To clarify this point further, let's consider the nobles from two perspectives: those who align their interests closely with yours and those who do not. The nobles who fully commit to supporting your rule and are not driven by greed deserve honor and respect. They should be valued allies. However, those who do not fully align themselves with your interests can be approached in two ways. Some may lack courage and conviction, making them potential allies, especially if they offer wise counsel. In times of prosperity, they should be esteemed, but in adversity, they pose little threat. On the other hand, if nobles avoid binding themselves to your cause out of personal ambition, it signifies that they prioritize their own interests over yours. In such cases, a prince must be wary of them, treating them as if they were outright enemies, for they are likely to contribute to his downfall in difficult times. Similarly, a prince who rises to power with the support of the people should strive to maintain their favor. This is easily achievable since the people merely seek protection from oppression. However, a prince who gains power against the will of the people with the backing of the nobles must prioritize winning over the populace. By offering them protection and delivering kindness instead of the harm they anticipated, he can forge stronger bonds with them. When people receive goodness from someone they expected cruelty from, their loyalty to that person deepens. Thus, winning the people's affection is vital for a prince's security, especially in times of adversity. While there are various strategies to accomplish this, they must be adapted to the specific circumstances, making it impossible to prescribe fixed rules. However, one thing remains clear: a prince must ensure the people's loyalty, as it is crucial for his stability in challenging times. Nabis, the prince of the Spartans, faced the combined onslaught of all Greece and a victorious Roman army. Despite this formidable challenge, he successfully defended his country and his government. However, his security against a few adversaries wouldn't have been enough if the people had turned against him. It's important to note that the proverb, "He who builds on the people builds on the mud," holds true for private citizens who rely on the populace to rescue them from oppression. History has shown us instances like the fate of the Gracchi in Rome and Messer Giorgio Scali in Florence, where such reliance proved futile. But when a prince establishes themselves firmly, commands respect, and possesses courage and resolve, they can count on the people's support. As long as the prince remains undaunted in the face of adversity and inspires confidence in the people, they will not be deceived. This demonstrates the importance of laying solid foundations for principality. These types of governments are most vulnerable during the transition from civil to absolute rule. When princes govern through magistrates, their authority is weaker and more precarious. This is because their power depends entirely on the goodwill of those elevated to the magistracy. In turbulent times, these citizens can easily undermine the government through intrigue or defiance. Moreover, the prince cannot wield absolute authority during tumults, as citizens are accustomed to obeying magistrates, not him. This poses a challenge in finding trustworthy individuals during uncertain times. A wise prince must ensure that his citizens always perceive a need for the state and for his leadership, regardless of circumstances. By fostering a sense of dependency on the state and himself, he can cultivate unwavering loyalty among his people. This strategic approach ensures that the citizen. Chapter 10. It's important to assess whether a prince possesses the means to sustain himself independently or constantly requires assistance from others. Those who can rely on their own resources are capable of raising a sufficient army or amassing wealth to confront any adversary head-on. On the other hand, those who must shelter behind walls and cannot confront enemies openly always need external support. We've discussed the former case already, but we'll revisit it if necessary. For the latter, the advice is straightforward: such princes should fortify their towns and refrain from defending the countryside. A well-fortified town, coupled with effective governance as previously discussed, deters attacks because adversaries are reluctant to face the challenges posed by a well-defended stronghold and a populace that doesn't resent its ruler. Cities in Germany exemplify this principle. They enjoy complete autonomy, own minimal surrounding territory, and only defer to the emperor when they choose to. They fear neither the emperor nor any other neighboring power because their fortifications make assaulting them seem arduous and time-consuming. They maintain proper defenses, including artillery, and stock public depots with a year's worth of provisions. Additionally, they ensure the populace remains content by providing employment opportunities and upholding military training, which further strengthens the city's resilience. Therefore, a prince with a fortified city and a favorable relationship with the people is unlikely to face attack. Even if threatened, they can repel adversaries with ease. Moreover, the unpredictability of worldly affairs makes it nearly impossible for an army to remain in the field unchallenged for a year. Some may argue that if the populace witnesses their property outside the city being destroyed, they'll lose patience and turn against the prince. However, a courageous and astute prince can overcome such challenges by instilling hope, instilling fear of the enemy's cruelty, and skillfully managing bold subjects. Furthermore, upon the enemy's arrival, they would naturally proceed to ravage and destroy the countryside while the people's spirits are still inflamed and eager to defend. Therefore, the prince should not hesitate to act promptly. Delaying action only exacerbates the situation. Once tempers have cooled, the damage is irreversible, and there's no remedy. At that point, the people, having suffered losses and destruction in defense of their prince, are even more inclined to unite with him. They perceive him as indebted to them for protecting their interests amidst adversity. Humans are naturally inclined to feel obligated by the benefits they bestow as much as by those they receive. Thus, with careful consideration, a wise prince can easily maintain the steadfast loyalty of his citizens throughout, as long as he consistently supports and defends them. Chapter 11. Now, let's discuss ecclesiastical principalities, where the challenges lie not in acquiring them, but rather in understanding their unique nature. These principalities can be acquired through capability or good fortune, yet they can also be held without either. They are sustained by the ancient ordinances of religion, which possess an unparalleled power. The princes of ecclesiastical states have territories but do not actively defend them, and they have subjects but do not exert direct rule over them. Remarkably, despite their unguarded states and lack of direct governance, these principalities remain secure and content. Their stability is upheld by powers beyond human comprehension, and it would be presumptuous to delve further into their divine workings. Nevertheless, one might wonder how the Church came to wield such immense temporal power. Historically, prior to the intervention of Charles, King of France, Italy was governed by various powers including the Pope, the Venetians, the King of Naples, the Duke of Milan, and the Florentines. The primary concerns of these rulers were to prevent foreign incursions into Italy and to limit territorial expansion among themselves. Of particular concern were the Papal States and the Venetians. To curb Venetian influence, the other powers formed alliances, and to control the Pope, they manipulated the Roman barons, who were divided into factions such as the Orsini and the Colonnesi. These factions perpetuated disorder and weakened papal authority. Even the most capable popes, like Sixtus, struggled to overcome these internal divisions. Additionally, the short average lifespan of a pope, around 10 years, limited their ability to address these challenges effectively. Consequently, the temporal power of the pope was generally undervalued in Italy. Following Alexander VI, who demonstrated the potent combination of wealth and military might for a pope, Pope Julius continued to advance the Church's interests. Through the Duke Valentino's actions and the support of the French, Alexander achieved significant victories, akin to those described in the Duke's actions. While Alexander's primary aim was to elevate the Duke rather than the Church, his efforts inadvertently contributed to the Church's rise. Following Alexander's demise and the Duke's downfall, the Church inherited the fruits of their endeavors. When Pope Julius ascended, he found a strengthened Church, in possession of the Romagna and with the Roman barons subdued. Thanks to Alexander's earlier reforms, the Church had established new means of accumulating wealth. Julius not only continued these practices but also sought to expand Church influence further. His ambitions included acquiring Bologna, weakening the Venetians, and expelling the French from Italy. Julius succeeded in these endeavors, earning praise for strengthening the Church rather than pursuing personal gain. He effectively managed the Orsini and Colonnesi factions, preventing them from destabilizing Rome. By denying them the influence of cardinals, Julius curbed their ability to foment unrest. His successor, Pope Leo, inherited a powerful pontificate, and it is hoped that through his virtues and benevolence, he will further enhance the Church's standing and reverence. Chapter 12. Having thoroughly examined the distinctive traits of the principalities as initially outlined and delved into the factors determining their success or failure, as well as elucidated the various strategies employed to acquire and maintain them, it is now pertinent to discuss the general tactics of offense and defense applicable to each. As previously emphasized, it is imperative for a prince to establish a solid foundation, failing which his downfall becomes inevitable. Among the primary pillars sustaining all states, whether newly formed, ancient, or composite, are robust laws and potent arms. Given that effective laws cannot exist without a well-armed state, it follows that where arms are strong, laws tend to be just. For the purposes of this discussion, I shall focus on the aspect of arms. In the defense of his state, a prince relies either on his own forces or on mercenaries, auxiliaries, or a combination thereof. However, mercenaries and auxiliaries prove to be both ineffectual and perilous. Relying on them for the defense of one's state leads to neither stability nor security, for they are disunited, ambitious, lacking in discipline, faithless, valorous among allies but cowardly in the face of enemies. Bereft of piety or loyalty, they remain faithful only as long as the paycheck endures. They readily enlist in your service during peacetime but desert or flee at the first sign of conflict. The history of Italy stands as a stark testament to the folly of entrusting her defense to mercenaries, as their ultimate failure was laid bare when foreign invaders arrived. Indeed, the invasion of Italy by King Charles of France, accomplished seemingly with ease, was facilitated by Italy's over-reliance on mercenaries. While it is true that our sins played a role in inviting such calamity, they were not the sins of which we were warned, but rather the sins of short-sightedness and misplaced trust in mercenaries. It is the princes who bore the brunt of this folly, paying the price for their misplaced faith in hired swords. One of Alexander VI's memorable quips, with chalk in hand, referred to Charles VIII's swift conquest of Italy, suggesting that the mere act of marking lodgings for his soldiers with chalk led to the country's subjugation. Lord Bacon's account in The History of Henry VII echoes this sentiment, depicting Charles's conquest and subsequent loss of Naples as a fleeting dreamlike episode, with the Frenchmen seemingly marking their lodgings with chalk rather than engaging in battle. This anecdote underscores the shortcomings of relying on mercenaries. Mercenary captains, whether competent or not, pose inherent risks. Capable captains inevitably harbor aspirations of personal greatness, often at the expense of their employers or others, while incompetent ones spell ruin in their ineptitude. Critics might argue that all armed individuals, whether mercenaries or not, behave similarly. However, when military action becomes necessary, it is incumbent upon a prince to lead personally, assuming the role of captain. Similarly, a republic must entrust its defense to its citizens, recalling unsatisfactory commanders and retaining worthy ones through legislation. History bears witness to the superiority of states and republics that rely on their own armed forces, while mercenaries tend to cause more harm than good. Indeed, it is more challenging to subjugate a republic armed with its own forces than one dependent on foreign mercenaries. The enduring freedom and strength of ancient Rome, Sparta, and the Swiss Confederation serve as compelling examples. Consider the Carthaginians, who, despite having citizen captains, fell victim to oppression by their mercenaries after the initial war with Rome. Similarly, the Thebans, after the death of Epaminondas, entrusted their soldiers to Philip of Macedon, only to lose their liberty upon his victory. After Duke Filippo's demise, the Milanese sought Francesco Sforza's aid against the Venetians. Sforza, having defeated the Venetians at Caravaggio, eventually turned against his Milanese benefactors, forming an alliance with the Venetians to subdue Milan. Sforza's father, having been hired by Queen Johanna of Naples, abandoned her defense, forcing her to seek refuge with the King of Aragon to safeguard her kingdom. While the Venetians and Florentines expanded their territories through military prowess, Their captains did not seize princely power but instead defended their respective states. This outcome was partly due to chance. For instance, Giovanni Acuto failed to conquer, and thus his loyalty to Florence remained untested. However, had he succeeded, Florence would have been at his mercy. Sforza contended with the Bracceschi, who kept him in check, while Francesco Sforza pursued ambitions in Lombardy, leaving Florence secure. In a recent example, Florence appointed Pagolo Vitelli as captain, recognizing his military prowess. Had Vitelli conquered Pisa, Florence would have been compelled to align with him, fearing his potential alliance with their enemies. The Venetians, in their early naval exploits, demonstrated prudence and valor with their own forces, but their land campaigns led them to rely on mercenary captains. Carmignola's lukewarm commitment to war prompted the Venetians to fear losing their conquests. To safeguard their gains, they resorted to his assassination. Subsequent captains, like Bartolomeo de Bergamo, brought more losses than gains, culminating in the catastrophic defeat at Vila, where they lost centuries of acquisitions in a single battle. Such arms yield slow, meager conquests but sudden, devastating losses. As I delve into the history of Italy, a land long dominated by mercenaries, it's crucial to examine their influence more deeply to better understand how to counteract it. In recent times, the imperial authority in Italy has waned, while the temporal power of the Pope has increased. Italy has become fragmented, with many great cities rising against their oppressive nobles, who were formerly favored by the emperor. Meanwhile, the Church supported these cities to expand its influence in temporal affairs, leading some citizens to become princes. Consequently, Italy fell into the hands of the Church and republics, neither of which had a tradition of military prowess, prompting them to enlist foreign soldiers. The first notable figure in this mercenary tradition was Alberigo de Conio, a Romagnan soldier whose legacy influenced captains like Braccio and Sforza, who, in their time, wielded considerable power in Italy. Subsequently, a succession of mercenary captains emerged, shaping the fate of Italy. However, their valor ultimately led to Italy's subjugation by Charles, exploitation by Louis, devastation by Ferdinand, and humiliation by the Swiss. Their guiding principle was to diminish the importance of infantry to elevate their own status. Relying on pay rather than territory, they favored cavalry, as a small but well-equipped cavalry force brought them prestige. In a force of 20,000 soldiers, only a fraction were infantry. They also adopted tactics to minimize risk and exertion, avoiding direct combat and preferring to capture enemies for ransom rather than killing them. They refrained from night attacks and winter campaigns to reduce fatigue and danger. These tactics, sanctioned by their military doctrines, were devised to mitigate risks and hardships. However, they ultimately contributed to Italy's subjugation and loss of respect. Chapter 13. Auxiliaries, another ineffective arm, are called upon when a prince seeks outside forces to aid and defend, as exemplified by Pope Julius in recent history. When his mercenaries proved unreliable in the Ferrara campaign, he turned to auxiliaries, striking a deal with Ferdinand, King of Spain, for support with troops and arms. While these auxiliaries may possess inherent utility and quality, they invariably prove detrimental to the one who solicits their assistance. In defeat, one is ruined, and in victory, one becomes their captive. Although ancient tales abound with such examples, I must highlight this recent instance involving Pope Julius II, whose perilous decision cannot be overlooked. In his pursuit of Ferrara, he entrusted himself entirely to foreign aid, courting grave danger. However, fortune intervened with a twist of fate, sparing him the consequences of his imprudent choice. Despite his auxiliaries suffering defeat at Ravenna, and the unexpected rise of the Swiss forces driving out the victors, Julius managed to evade capture by both his foes and his foreign allies, ultimately prevailing through means unaided by the latter. An analogous predicament befell the Florentines, who, lacking their own military strength, dispatched 10,000 French soldiers to seize Pisa, thus exposing themselves to greater peril than ever before in their tumultuous history. The Emperor of Constantinople, in his bid to counter his neighbors, dispatched 10,000 Turks into Greece. However, upon the cessation of hostilities, they refused to depart, marking the onset of Greece's subjugation to the infidels. Hence, those who harbor no ambitions of conquest should shun these forces, for they pose far greater risks than mercenaries. With them, ruin is immediate. They act in unison and obey external authorities. Mercenaries, on the other hand, require more time and favorable circumstances to turn against you. They lack unity, serving at your behest, and a third party, whom you've elevated, cannot swiftly amass enough power to harm you. In mercenaries, cowardice is the chief peril, in auxiliaries, valor. Therefore, the prudent prince eschews these arms, favoring his own forces, deeming victory achieved with foreign arms as hollow. I never hesitate to cite Cesare Borgia and his exploits. Initially, he employed auxiliaries, exclusively French troops, to conquer the Romagna, seizing Imola and Forli. However, perceiving them as unreliable, he later opted for mercenaries, enlisting the Orsini and Vitelli. Yet, upon finding them untrustworthy and treacherous, he eradicated them and turned to his own soldiers. The disparity between his reputation with each force is evident. He was most esteemed when in command of his own loyal troops. I hadn't planned on extending beyond Italian and recent examples, but I cannot omit Hiero, the Syracusan, as he exemplifies the point I've been making. Elevated to lead the army by the Syracusans, he swiftly realized the futility of a mercenary force, akin to our Italian condottieri. Unable to retain or release them, he had them all eliminated. Subsequently, he waged war with his own troops rather than relying on foreigners. I also want to bring to mind a relevant instance from the Old Testament. When David volunteered to face Goliath, Saul outfitted him with his own armor to bolster his courage. However, David declined the armor, realizing it hindered him, and instead chose to confront the enemy with his sling and knife. In essence, the arms of others either slip from your grasp, burden you, or bind you tightly. Charles VII, the predecessor of King Louis XI, freed France from English rule through a combination of good fortune and bravery. Recognizing the need for a standing army, he implemented ordinances regarding both men-at-arms and infantry. However, his son, King Louis, made the error of disbanding the infantry and relying heavily on Swiss mercenaries. This decision, along with others, has proven detrimental to the kingdom, as it has diminished the value of France's own military forces. By elevating the reputation of the Swiss, King Louis weakened his own army, rendering it unable to stand against Swiss mercenaries and less effective against other adversaries. The French army has thus become a mixture of mercenaries and national forces, which, while better than relying solely on mercenaries or auxiliaries, is still inferior to a fully national force. This example underscores the importance of maintaining one's own military strength, as France would have been much more formidable had Charles's ordinances been upheld or expanded. The limited foresight of individuals often blinds them to the hidden dangers of seemingly beneficial decisions, akin to the onset of a fever. Therefore, a ruler who cannot anticipate and address problems before they arise cannot be considered truly wise, a skill possessed by few. Reflecting on the downfall of the Roman Empire, one can trace its decline back to the recruitment of the Goths into its ranks. This marked the beginning of the empire's decline, as its strength and vitality gradually passed into the hands of others. In conclusion, it is evident that no principality can be truly secure without its own military forces. Relying solely on good fortune leaves it vulnerable, lacking the strength to defend itself in times of adversity. Wise individuals have long recognized that fame and power built on anything other than one's own strength are inherently unstable and precarious. True strength lies in having forces composed of loyal subjects, citizens, or dependents, while mercenaries or auxiliaries offer only temporary solutions. The path to preparing one's own forces can be found by reflecting on the principles I have outlined and studying the strategies employed by historical figures like Philip, the father of Alexander the Great, as well as various republics and princes. These lessons serve as invaluable guides for securing and organizing one's own military might. Chapter 14. A prince's sole focus should be on understanding the art of conflict and its principles. War is the fundamental domain of governance, providing not only the means to maintain power but also the path for those aspiring to ascend from obscurity to rulership. Conversely, Those who prioritize comfort over martial prowess risk losing their domains. Neglecting the art of war is the primary cause of downfall, while mastery of it is the key to acquisition. Take Francesco Sforza, for example, who rose from obscurity to become Duke of Milan through martial prowess. His descendants, however, fell from power when they shunned the challenges of warfare. Being unarmed invites contempt and undermines authority. There is an inherent imbalance between the armed and the unarmed, making it unreasonable to expect obedience from armed subjects or security among armed servants. A ruler who lacks martial understanding not only fails to earn the respect of their soldiers but also cannot rely on their loyalty. Therefore, a ruler must never neglect the study of warfare, dedicating even more attention to it during peacetime through both practical engagement and scholarly pursuit. In terms of practical action, a prince must prioritize the organization and training of their troops. Constant engagement in hunting not only toughens the body but also imparts valuable insights into local terrain. Understanding the landscape, how mountains, valleys, and plains interact, and the characteristics of rivers and marshes, is crucial. This knowledge serves a dual purpose. Firstly, it enhances the ruler's ability to defend their own territory. Secondly, it provides a foundation for comprehending other regions in the future. The geographical features of one area often bear similarities to those of others, facilitating the ruler's understanding of unfamiliar terrain. Mastery of these skills is essential for a ruler, enabling them to outmaneuver their enemies, strategically deploy troops, and effectively lead campaigns, including besieging towns. Philopoemen, leader of the Achaeans, earned praise for his unwavering focus on military strategy even during times of peace. When in the countryside with friends, he engaged them in discussions about hypothetical battlefield scenarios. Analyzing potential advantages, tactics, and retreat strategies, he ensured that no unforeseen circumstances could catch him off guard in war. To sharpen his intellect, a ruler should delve into history, studying the actions of renowned figures to understand the secrets of their successes and failures. By emulating the virtues and strategies of illustrious predecessors, like Alexander the Great mirroring Achilles, Caesar inspired by Alexander, and Scipio drawing from Cyrus, a ruler can achieve greatness. For instance, Scipio's emulation of Cyrus, as depicted in Xenophon's writings, illustrates how aligning with the virtues of a revered figure can lead to glory. A wise ruler must continuously prepare for adversity during times of peace, diligently expanding their resources. By doing so, they fortify themselves against the whims of fortune, ensuring they are ready to withstand any challenges that may arise. Chapter 15. Now let's consider how a prince should interact with subjects and friends. I know this topic has been extensively covered by many others, so I may seem audacious for revisiting it. However, my aim is to offer practical advice that can truly benefit the reader, rather than rehashing theoretical concepts. It's more valuable to focus on reality rather than fantasy, as many depictions of governance are far removed from actual experience. Ignoring the truth in favor of idealistic notions can lead to ruin rather than preservation. Therefore, a prince must be pragmatic, understanding when it is necessary to act in ways that may be deemed wrong by conventional standards. In discussing the qualities of princes, it's evident that each is characterized by traits that invite both criticism and praise. Some are known for their generosity, while others are labeled as miserly. Some are considered compassionate, while others are seen as cruel. These attributes, whether positive or negative, contribute to a prince's reputation. While it may be ideal for a prince to embody all virtuous qualities, human nature makes it impossible to do so completely. Instead, a prudent prince must strive to avoid vices that would jeopardize their rule and embrace those that may bring security and prosperity, even if they appear as vices on the surface. It's essential to prioritize the preservation of the state above personal reputation, as certain behaviors may be necessary for maintaining stability and ensuring the state's survival. Chapter 16. Let's start by discussing the virtue of generosity. It's certainly advantageous for a prince to be seen as liberal, but practicing generosity without gaining recognition for it can actually be detrimental. If one acts generously but doesn't receive credit for it, they risk being perceived as the opposite. Therefore, To maintain a reputation for liberality, a prince must spare no expense in demonstrating magnificence. This may lead to excessive spending, heavy taxation of the people, and other measures to acquire funds. However, such actions can quickly turn the prince into a figure of resentment among the populace, especially if they become impoverished in the process. Ultimately, the prince may find himself in a precarious position, facing challenges without the support of his subjects. In light of this, a wise prince should not fear being labeled as miserly if practicing generosity would come at great personal cost. Instead, by managing resources prudently, defending the realm effectively, and avoiding financial strain on the people, the prince can actually earn greater respect. It's often those who are perceived as frugal that achieve remarkable feats, while those who are overly generous may falter. For example, Pope Julius II initially gained popularity for his generosity, but he later abandoned this reputation when he waged war without imposing heavy taxes on his subjects. Similarly, the King of Spain's success in numerous endeavors can be attributed in part to his perceived thriftiness. Therefore, a prince who can govern effectively without resorting to exploitation or impoverishment should not worry about being seen as mean, as this perceived vice can actually strengthen their rule. If someone argues that Caesar attained power through generosity, and many others have risen to great heights by being perceived as liberal, the response is twofold. Are you already a prince, or on the path to becoming one? In the former case, such liberality can be perilous. In the latter, it's essential for securing support. Caesar, aiming for preeminence in Rome, exemplified this ambition. However, had he not moderated his spending upon achieving power, his reign would have crumbled. Regarding the use of armies, a prince must discern between spending his own resources or those of his subjects. In the former scenario, thriftiness is prudent. In the latter, opportunities for generosity should not be overlooked. When a prince finances military campaigns through plunder and extortion, it's crucial to maintain an image of liberality to retain the loyalty of soldiers. It's acceptable to be generous with resources obtained from sources other than one's own or the subjects'. Liberality, however, is fleeting, as it diminishes one's capacity to continue being generous. This can lead to poverty, disdain, or, in efforts to avoid destitution, rapacious behavior that breeds hatred. A prince must avoid being despised and hated at all costs, as liberality often leads to both outcomes. Therefore, it's wiser to endure the reproach associated with frugality, which may not inspire hatred, than to earn a reputation for generosity that invites condemnation and animosity. Chapter 17. When considering the other qualities mentioned earlier, it's imperative for every prince to aspire to be seen as merciful rather than cruel. However, he must exercise caution not to abuse this mercy. Take the case of Cesare Borgia, often labeled as cruel. Yet, his firmness brought peace and loyalty to the Romagna, contrasting with the Florentines who, fearing a reputation for cruelty, allowed Pistoia to be devastated. Thus, a prince, while maintaining unity and loyalty among his subjects, need not fear accusations of cruelty. A few strategic examples of severity can prevent greater disorder, as opposed to excessive leniency leading to chaos, murders, or robberies that harm the populace at large, while the prince's actions typically affect only individuals. For a new prince, the charge of cruelty is almost inevitable due to the inherent dangers in new territories. As Virgil conveyed through Dido's justification of her harsh rule in Carthage. Residential dura, et regni novitas mitalia cogunt. Moliri, et late fines custo turi. Hard necessity, and the newness of my reign, urge me to shape such laws and guard my realm with care. Nonetheless, the prince should exercise restraint in belief and action, avoiding both excessive confidence that breeds recklessness and excessive distrust that breeds intolerance. Instead, he should proceed with moderation, prudence, and humanity, ensuring that his actions are tempered by a judicious balance between confidence and caution. The question arises, is it better to be loved or feared? Ideally, one would want both qualities, but since it's challenging to achieve both simultaneously, it's safer to be feared than loved if you must choose between them. This is because, in general, people are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous. While they may offer everything when success seems assured, they can turn against you when faced with adversity. A prince who relies solely on promises, neglecting other precautions, is doomed to fail. Friendships based on payments rather than genuine admiration or respect may be acquired but are not reliable in times of need. People are more inclined to offend someone they love rather than someone they fear, as love is easily broken for personal gain, while fear of punishment remains constant. However, a prince should aim to instill fear in such a manner that, even if he fails to win love, he avoids breeding hatred. He can endure being feared as long as he is not despised, which will happen as long as he refrains from seizing the property and women of his citizens and subjects. When it becomes necessary to take someone's life, it must be done with proper justification and clear cause, but above all, he must refrain from seizing the property of others. People tend to forget the death of their father more quickly than the loss of their inheritance. Moreover, excuses for confiscating property are never lacking, as those who resort to robbery will always find pretexts for taking what belongs to others. However, justifications for taking lives are harder to come by and are quickly forgotten. When a prince is with his army and commands a multitude of soldiers, it becomes imperative for him to disregard the reputation of cruelty, for without it, he would never be able to keep his army united or obedient to its duties. One of the remarkable feats of Hannibal was his ability to lead a vast army, composed of diverse races, to fight in foreign lands without encountering any internal dissensions or challenges to his authority, whether in times of adversity or success. This was solely due to his extreme cruelty, which, combined with his unmatched valor, earned him reverence and fear from his soldiers. Without this cruelty, his other virtues would not have sufficed to command such respect. Some writers may admire his deeds from one perspective while condemning the main reason behind them. Indeed, without his cruelty, his other virtues would not have been sufficient, as evidenced by the case of Scipio, a man of exceptional merit, against whom his own army rebelled in Spain due to his excessive leniency, which allowed his soldiers too much freedom, contrary to military discipline. This leniency earned him criticism in the Senate, and was seen as corrupting the Roman army. The Locrians suffered at the hands of Scipio's legate, yet Scipio failed to avenge them or punish the legate's insolence due to his overly gentle nature. Someone in the Senate, seeking to excuse him, remarked that many are better at avoiding mistakes than correcting the errors of others. If allowed to persist in his command, this detrimental trait would have tarnished Scipio's fame and glory over time. However, being under the Senate's control, this flaw remained hidden and even contributed to his glory. In conclusion, considering that people love according to their own will and fear according to the will of the prince, a wise prince should establish his authority on what he can control, rather than relying on others' sentiments. He should strive only to avoid being hated, as noted. Chapter 18. Everyone agrees that it's admirable for a prince to be faithful and live with honesty rather than deceit. However, history has shown us that many great princes have considered good faith to be of little importance. Instead, they relied on cunning to outsmart others and ultimately triumph over those who trusted their word. There are two ways of contesting, one through legal means, the other through force. The former is characteristic of humans, while the latter is akin to beasts. Yet, because legal recourse is often insufficient, resorting to force becomes necessary. Therefore, a prince must understand how to harness both the qualities of a man and a beast. Ancient writers figuratively taught princes this concept by describing how Achilles and other ancient princes were raised and educated by the centaur Chiron, who possessed both human and beastly qualities. This allegory underscores the necessity for a prince to blend both aspects, as relying on one alone is unsustainable. When a prince is compelled to adopt the qualities of a beast, he should emulate the characteristics of both the fox and the lion. The lion lacks the cunning to evade traps, while the fox lacks the strength to confront wolves. Thus, a prince must be like a fox to detect traps and a lion to intimidate adversaries. Those who rely solely on the strength of the lion misunderstand the art of rule. Therefore, a wise prince cannot and should not uphold his word when doing so would be detrimental to his interests, especially when the circumstances that led to his pledge of faith no longer exist. If everyone were inherently good, this principle would not apply. However, because people are untrustworthy and will not keep faith with you, you are not obligated to do so with them. Moreover, a prince will always find legitimate reasons to justify his non-observance of faith. Countless modern examples illustrate how treaties and agreements have been rendered null and void due to the treachery of princes. Those who have mastered the art of cunning have achieved the greatest success. However, it's crucial to know how to conceal this trait and become adept at pretending and deceiving. People are often simple and easily influenced by their immediate needs, making it easy for those who seek to deceive to find willing victims. A recent example illustrates this point vividly. Alexander VI was a master of deception. He consistently misled others and never entertained the thought of acting otherwise. Despite his frequent lies and broken promises, he always managed to find gullible individuals who fell prey to his deceitful schemes. His knack for understanding human nature allowed his deceptions to succeed as he desired. Alexander never practiced what he preached. Cesare never preached what he practiced. Italian proverb. Therefore, it's not necessary for a prince to possess all the virtuous qualities I've mentioned, but it's crucial to appear to possess them. I'll go even further and assert that it's harmful to consistently adhere to these virtues, while it's advantageous to only appear to have them. It's beneficial to appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, and upright, and even better to genuinely possess these qualities. However, one should cultivate a mindset that allows for flexibility, enabling a shift to the opposite traits when circumstances demand it. It's crucial to grasp that a prince, especially a new one, cannot always adhere to the virtues for which men are esteemed. Often, to maintain the stability of the state, he is compelled to act in ways that seem contrary to fidelity, friendship, humanity, and religion. Therefore, he must possess a flexible mindset that can adapt to the ever-changing winds of fortune. However, he should strive to remain virtuous whenever possible, only deviating from it when absolutely necessary. To maintain his image, a prince must be cautious never to utter anything lacking the 5 qualities mentioned above. He should always appear merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious in the eyes and ears of others. Of these, religiousness is particularly crucial, as appearances often weigh more heavily than reality. People judge based on what they see rather than what they know, and it's easier to maintain a favorable appearance than to challenge it. Consequently, as long as a prince successfully conquers and holds his state, his methods will be perceived as honest, and he will earn praise from all quarters. This is because the masses are swayed by appearances and outcomes, and in the world, the opinions of the majority hold sway. There exists a contemporary prince, whose name it's prudent not to mention, known for preaching peace and good faith while harboring hostility towards both. Had he adhered to either, it would have cost him his reputation and kingdom on numerous occasions. Chapter 19. Now, regarding the qualities mentioned earlier, I've covered the most significant ones. Briefly, I'll touch on the others under this general principle. A prince must strive to avoid actions that breed hatred or contempt towards him. Once he accomplishes this, he's fulfilled his duty and need not worry about other criticisms. Above all, being rapacious and violating the property and honor of his subjects makes him detested. He must steer clear of both. When neither their possessions nor dignity are harmed, most people remain content, and the prince only faces the ambition of a few, whom he can easily manage in various ways. It's disdainful for a prince to be seen as fickle, frivolous, weak, indecisive, or mean-spirited. He must shield himself from these traits as if from a perilous rock. Instead, he should display greatness, courage, seriousness, and strength in his actions. In his dealings with his subjects, he should demonstrate unwavering judgments, maintaining a reputation that makes it impossible for anyone to deceive or manipulate him. A prince who gives off such an impression of himself is highly regarded. And one who is highly regarded is not easily plotted against. Therefore, a prince should have 2 concerns: internal threats from his subjects and external threats from foreign powers. Against external threats, he must be well armed and have strong allies. If he's well prepared externally, he'll have peaceful affairs internally, unless they've already been disrupted by conspiracy. Even if external matters are in turmoil, with proper preparation and conduct, he can withstand any assault, just as Nabis the Spartan did. When it comes to his subjects, if external affairs are tumultuous, a prince's main concern should be the possibility of secret conspiracies. However, a prince can easily protect himself from this threat by avoiding actions that breed hatred and contempt among the people. Keeping the populace satisfied is crucial, as I previously elaborated. One of the most effective remedies against conspiracies is for the prince not to be despised and hated by the people. A conspirator typically expects to gain favor with the populace by removing the prince. But when the conspirator knows that his actions will only alienate the people, he's less likely to proceed, given the countless obstacles conspirators face. History shows that while conspiracies are plentiful, successful ones are rare. This is because a conspirator cannot act alone, and he can only find accomplices among those he believes to be discontented. Once a discontented person learns of the plot, they have the means to betray the conspirator for their own gain. Therefore, it takes an exceptionally loyal friend or an unwavering enemy of the prince to remain faithful. In summary, for the conspirator, there's only fear, jealousy, and the looming threat of punishment. But for the prince, there's the authority of the principality, the law, the support of allies, and the defense of the state. When you add to these factors the goodwill of the people, it becomes highly unlikely that anyone would dare to conspire. While most conspirators fear the repercussions before executing their plan, in this scenario, they also fear the consequences afterward, as they would have made enemies of the people and have no chance of escape. Numerous examples could be cited to illustrate this point, but I'll suffice with one from the recent past. In Bologna, during the time of our forefathers, Messer Annibale Bentivogli, the ruling prince, was assassinated by the Canci, who conspired against him. All members of his family perished except for Messer Giovanni, who was still a child. The people, fueled by their strong loyalty to the Bentivogli family, swiftly rose up and slew all the conspirators. Such was the depth of popular goodwill towards the Bentivogli house in Bologna that, despite the absence of any suitable successor after Annibale's death, the Bolognese learned of a member of the Bentivogli family residing in Florence, previously thought to be the son of a blacksmith. They promptly summoned him and entrusted him with the governance of their city until Messer Giovanni reached maturity and assumed leadership. From this example, it becomes clear that a prince need not worry much about conspiracies when his people hold him in high regard. However, if the populace is hostile and harbors resentment towards him, then he should be wary of every potential threat. Well-governed states and wise princes understand the importance of avoiding actions that could drive the nobility to desperation and ensuring the satisfaction and contentment of the people. This remains one of the utmost priorities for any prince. One of the most well-organized and governed kingdoms in our modern era is France. Within its borders, several key institutions contribute to the king's liberty and security. Foremost among these is the Parliament and its authority. Recognizing the ambitious nature and boldness of the nobility, the kingdom's founder understood the necessity of offering them some leverage to keep them in check. Conversely, aware of the people's fear-driven animosity towards the nobles, he sought to safeguard them. However, he did not wish for this responsibility to fall solely on the king's shoulders. To circumvent potential reproach from both the nobility and the populace, he established an arbiter, a figure capable of restraining the powerful and advocating for the less influential without implicating the king. This arrangement not only demonstrates astute foresight but also serves as a significant safeguard for the king and the realm. From this, we can deduce that princes should delegate matters of reproach to others while retaining control over matters of favor. Furthermore, a prince should cultivate amicable relations with the nobility without incurring the people's disdain. Some may argue that the lives and deaths of certain Roman emperors contradict this perspective. Indeed, while some of them led honorable lives and displayed admirable qualities, they ultimately met downfall or assassination at the hands of their subjects. To address these objections, it's worth revisiting the character of these emperors and examining the factors that led to their demise. Through this analysis, we can discern parallels with the principles I've outlined, offering valuable insights to those studying the affairs of that era. Let's consider the line of Roman emperors from Marcus Aurelius the philosopher to Maximinus. This list includes Marcus himself, his son Commodus, Pertinax, Julian, Severus, and his son Antoninus Caracalla, Macrinus, Heliogabalus, Alexander, and Maximinus. What's striking here is that unlike other rulers facing challenges from ambitious nobles and a restless populace, Roman emperors had to contend with a third complication: the cruelty and greed of their own soldiers. This presented a daunting dilemma, satisfying both soldiers and civilians. The people preferred a peaceful, unassuming leader, while soldiers favored a bold, ruthless ruler who would let them indulge in excesses at the expense of the populace. Consequently, emperors who lacked innate authority or experience, especially newcomers to the throne, often prioritized appeasing the soldiers over the welfare of the people. This was a pragmatic choice, as princes inevitably incurred someone's hatred, and it was better to avoid the wrath of the most powerful. Thus, inexperienced emperors leaned towards pleasing the soldiers, hoping to retain control over them. This dynamic led to the unfortunate fates of Marcus, Pertinax, and Alexander, despite their modest lifestyles, commitment to justice, and aversion to cruelty. Marcus Aurelius, however, stands out as an exception. As he inherited the throne and owed nothing to soldiers or civilians, he maintained authority over both groups. Endowed with numerous virtues, he commanded respect and avoided being either hated or despised throughout his reign. Let's discuss Pertinax, who became emperor against the soldiers' wishes. Accustomed to Commodus's licentious rule, they couldn't tolerate Pertinax's attempts to impose discipline. His honest intentions only fueled their resentment, compounded by contempt for his age. Consequently, he was swiftly overthrown. This underscores a key point. Hatred can stem from both good and bad deeds. Sometimes, to maintain power, a prince must resort to unsavory actions when dealing with corrupt factions, be they the people, soldiers, or nobles, bending to their whims even at the cost of virtuous deeds. Now, on to Alexander, renowned for his benevolence. Despite his 14-year rule without unjust executions, he was seen as weak and overly influenced by his mother, leading to contempt and eventual assassination by the army. Conversely, Commodus, Severus, Antoninus Caracalla, and Maximinus exemplify cruelty and greed. To appease their soldiers, they perpetrated numerous atrocities against the people, leading to their downfalls, except Severus. His valor earned him the soldiers' admiration, enabling him to rule effectively despite oppressing the people. His actions, both fierce and cunning, demonstrated mastery in blending the qualities of the fox and the lion, essential for a successful prince, as previously discussed. Consider the case of Severus, faced with the challenge of securing the empire. Sensing Emperor Julian's lethargy, Severus seized an opportunity. Leading his army from Sclavonia to Rome under the guise of avenging Pertinax's death, he arrived in Italy swiftly and unexpectedly. The Senate, fearing reprisal, crowned him emperor and disposed of Julian. Severus then confronted two adversaries, Niger in the east and Albinus in the west. Wary of provoking both, he duped Albinus with promises of shared power, even sending him the title of Caesar. Albinus, deceived, accepted. After defeating and eliminating Niger, Severus returned to Rome, accusing Albinus of treachery and ingratitude. Pursuing him to France, Severus stripped Albinus of his position and life. A careful analysis reveals Severus as a formidable combination of lion and fox, valiant yet cunning. His actions earned him fear and respect, shielding him from the army's hatred despite his ruthlessness. This dual persona, coupled with his undeniable reputation, enabled Severus, a newcomer, to maintain a firm grip on the empire. Now, let's consider Antoninus, a man of remarkable qualities. Highly esteemed by the people and revered by soldiers, he was renowned for his martial prowess, enduring stamina, and disdain for luxury. These traits endeared him to the armies. However, his extreme ferocity and unprecedented cruelties tarnished his reputation. Engaging in countless murders, he orchestrated massacres in Rome and Alexandria, earning universal hatred and instilling fear even among his closest associates. Ultimately, he met his demise in the midst of his own army, slain by a centurion. Such calculated and daring acts of assassination, driven by unwavering resolve, pose a constant threat to princes. Their rarity may offer some solace, yet a prince must remain vigilant against grave offenses towards those in his service. Antoninus, however, neglected this caution, needlessly antagonizing the centurion by killing his brother and subjecting him to constant threats, a reckless decision that sealed the emperor's fate. Now, consider Commodus, who inherited the empire as the son of Marcus Aurelius. With a straightforward path to maintaining power, he could have followed his father's footsteps to garner favor with the people and soldiers. However, his inherent cruelty and brutality led him down a different path. Instead of upholding his dignity, he indulged in frivolous pursuits, frequently descending to the level of gladiators in the arena and engaging in other debaucheries unbefitting of imperial stature. As a result, he lost the respect of the soldiers and incurred both hatred and disdain. Ultimately, his despised status led to his downfall as he became the target of conspiracy and assassination. Let's consider Maximinus. A fiercely martial figure, he ascended to power after the armies, disenchanted with Alexander's perceived weakness, deposed him and hailed Maximinus as their new leader. However, Maximinus' reign was short-lived, marred by two factors that invited widespread disdain and contempt. Firstly, his humble origins as a shepherd in Thrace earned him ridicule and scorn, a fact widely known and deeply humiliating to all. Secondly, his delay in journeying to Rome to claim the imperial throne further eroded his standing. Moreover, his reputation for unbridled ferocity was well earned, as his appointed prefects in Rome and throughout the empire engaged in numerous acts of brutality. These atrocities incited global outrage at both his lowly birth and his barbaric governance. Rebellion erupted first in Africa, followed by a united front from the Senate, the people of Rome, and all of Italy. Even his own army turned against him, besieging Aquileia. Faced with mounting opposition and growing disillusionment among his troops, Maximinus met his demise at their hands. As for Heliogabalus, Macrinus, and Julian, they were swiftly eradicated, deemed utterly contemptible. In conclusion, it's evident that contemporary princes face far less pressure to excessively cater to their soldiers compared to ancient times. While some degree of indulgence is still necessary, modern armies lack the seasoned governance expertise of their Roman predecessors. Today, satisfying the populace holds greater importance for princes, except perhaps for rulers like the Turk and the Soldan, as the people wield considerable power in the modern era. I'll exclude the Turk from the previous discussion, as his approach differs significantly. He maintains a standing force of 12,000 infantry and 15,000 cavalry, crucial for upholding the kingdom's security and might. His paramount concern is cultivating their allegiance, setting aside any considerations for the populace. Similarly, the Soldan's realm operates on a comparable principle. With power concentrated in the hands of soldiers, his imperative is to retain their loyalty, regardless of popular sentiment. However, it's essential to grasp the unique nature of the Soldan's domain, which diverges from conventional principalities. It resembles the Christian pontificate, defying categorization as either hereditary or newly established. Here, succession isn't dictated by lineage. Instead, the position is conferred upon the individual chosen by those in authority. As a result, the ruler's offspring hold no claim to the throne, merely retaining noble status. This long-standing tradition distinguishes it from new principalities, sparing it from the challenges typically associated with nascent regimes. Despite the ruler's novelty, the state's institutional framework remains entrenched, seamlessly accommodating the transition as if he were its rightful heir. Returning to our discussion, it's evident that either being despised or being held in contempt proved fatal for the emperors mentioned earlier. It's clear how their fates diverged based on their actions. Some met favorable ends, while others faced ruin. Pertinax and Alexander, as new rulers, couldn't replicate Marcus's approach, given his inherited authority. Similarly, Caracalla, Commodus, and Maximinus would have met disaster had they emulated Severus, lacking the requisite valor. Thus, a newly appointed prince shouldn't mimic Marcus or Severus entirely. Instead, they should adopt aspects of Severus's approach to establish their rule and embrace Marcus's principles to uphold a stable and respected state. Chapter 20. 1. Various strategies have been employed by princes to maintain control over their states. Some have disarmed their subjects, while others have fueled internal divisions among their cities. Some have deliberately cultivated animosity against themselves, while others have sought to win over those initially distrusted. Fortresses have been built by some, only to be torn down by others. While a definitive judgment on these tactics depends on the specific circumstances of each state, I'll provide a comprehensive overview based on general principles. 2. It's rare for a new prince to disarm their subjects. Typically, they arm them instead. By providing arms, you gain control over them, turning potential distrust into loyalty. Those armed become your allies, while the rest, understanding the differential treatment, accept it as fair. Disarming, however, breeds resentment, signaling distrust and inviting hatred. Left unarmed, you may resort to mercenaries, insufficient against formidable foes and distrusted locals. Hence, new princes often arm their subjects, as history illustrates. Yet, when annexing a new territory to an existing state, disarmament may be necessary, except for loyalists, who, over time, can be pacified. Eventually, all armed forces should be integrated into your own military, particularly those from your original domain. 3. In the past, our ancestors advocated for controlling Pistoia through fostering factions and holding Pisa with fortresses. While this approach might have been effective when Italy was more evenly balanced, I doubt its relevance today. Fostering factions is no longer advisable. Divided cities quickly fall to enemies, as the weaker faction often collaborates with invaders. The Venetians, perhaps motivated by similar concerns, manipulated Guelph and Ghibelline factions in their tributary cities. Though they avoided outright conflict, these disputes weakened the citizens, preventing them from uniting against Venice. However, this strategy backfired when one faction seized power after a defeat. Such methods reveal weakness in the prince and are untenable in a strong principality. While useful in peacetime for managing subjects, they prove ineffective in times of war. 4. Truly, princes earn greatness by overcoming challenges and adversaries. Fortune, particularly when elevating a new prince, often orchestrates the emergence of enemies to provide opportunities for triumph. These obstacles serve as stepping stones for the prince's ascent, akin to a ladder erected by their adversaries. Hence, many believe that a wise prince, when possible, should cunningly provoke animosity against themselves. By defeating this hostility, they enhance their renown and stature. 5. Princes, especially those newly in power, often find more loyalty and support from those initially distrusted than from those initially trusted. Pandolfo Petrucci, the Prince of Siena, governed his state with the assistance of those who had once been viewed with suspicion. However, this principle cannot be applied universally, as it varies depending on the individuals involved. It is worth noting that individuals who were initially hostile to a new prince, especially if they require assistance themselves, can be easily won over and are often compelled to serve the prince faithfully. They recognize the necessity of redeeming themselves in the prince's eyes and thus prove more valuable than those who serve with excessive confidence and may neglect the prince's interests. Therefore, a prince who gains a new state through covert means must carefully consider the motives of those who support him. If their support stems from discontent with the previous regime rather than genuine affection for the prince, maintaining their loyalty will be challenging, as their demands may be insatiable. Examining both ancient and modern examples, we observe that it is easier for a prince to win over those who were once content under the previous government, even if they now oppose him, than those who were dissatisfied and initially supported his rise to power. 6. Throughout history, it has been common for princes to construct fortresses to strengthen their hold on power, serving as both a deterrent and a refuge against potential threats. This practice has its merits, as evidenced by past examples. However, in more recent times, we have seen instances where rulers have chosen to dismantle fortresses as a strategic decision. For instance, Messer Niccolò Vitelli demolished 2 fortresses in Città di Castello to solidify his control over the state. Likewise, Guido Ubaldo, Duke of Urbino, upon reclaiming his territory from Cesare Borgia, razed all fortresses in the province, believing that their absence would make it harder for him to lose control. The Bentivogli family, upon returning to Bologna, made a similar choice. The usefulness of fortresses depends on the circumstances. A prince who faces greater threats from domestic unrest than from external enemies may find fortresses beneficial, while one facing greater external threats may opt to forego them. Consider the case of the Castle of Milan, constructed by Francesco Sforza, which has caused more trouble for the Sforza dynasty than any external threat. This illustrates a crucial point: the most effective fortress is the goodwill of the people. Even if a ruler possesses formidable fortifications, they offer little protection if the populace harbors resentment. Foreign powers will readily support a discontented populace against a hated ruler. In modern times, few examples demonstrate the effectiveness of fortresses in securing power. The Countess of Forli is an exception, successfully using fortifications to withstand a popular uprising and await assistance from Milan. However, when faced with a combined attack from Cesare Borgia and her own people, the fortresses proved ineffective. In hindsight, it would have been wiser for her to prioritize earning the people's favor over relying solely on fortifications. Considering these factors, both the construction and abandonment of fortresses can be justified depending on the circumstances. What truly matters is that a ruler does not disregard the importance of maintaining the goodwill of the people, regardless of their reliance on fortresses. Chapter 21. Nothing elevates a prince's reputation more than bold undertakings and setting a compelling example. Take, for instance, Ferdinand of Aragon, the current King of Spain, who can be likened to a modern prince for his remarkable ascent from a relatively obscure monarch to the preeminent ruler in Christendom. His deeds speak volumes, characterized by greatness and some truly extraordinary feats. At the outset of his reign, Ferdinand embarked on the conquest of Granada, laying the cornerstone of his dominion. Initially proceeding with caution, he cleverly diverted the attention of the Castilian nobles to the war effort, preventing them from anticipating his subtle acquisition of power and authority. Through astute financial management, leveraging the resources of the church and the people, he sustained his armies throughout the protracted conflict, honing his military prowess in the process. Under the guise of religious fervor, Ferdinand pursued the expulsion of the Moors from his kingdom with a blend of piety and ruthlessness, a commendable yet seldom seen example. Expanding his ambitions, he ventured into Africa, made incursions into Italy, and even confronted France, each endeavor grand in scale and strategic significance. Such audacious actions, unfolding one after the other, kept his subjects captivated, their minds consumed with anticipation and admiration, leaving little opportunity for dissent to take root. Once again, a prince greatly benefits from setting remarkable precedents in domestic affairs, akin to the anecdotes told of Messer Bernabo da Milano. Whenever someone in civil life performed an extraordinary deed, whether good or bad, Bernabo would seize the opportunity to reward or punish them in a manner that garnered significant attention. A prince should always strive, above all else, to cultivate a reputation for greatness and distinction in every action they undertake. Furthermore, a prince earns respect when they demonstrate unwavering loyalty or unyielding enmity. That is to say, when they openly align themselves with one faction over another, without hesitation. This approach is far more advantageous than remaining neutral, especially when two powerful neighbors clash. In such a scenario, if one emerges victorious, you must either fear or placate them. It is always better to declare your allegiance and engage vigorously in the conflict. In the event of defeat, remaining neutral leaves you vulnerable to the conqueror's whims, without any recourse for protection or support. Those who emerge victorious will not trust hesitant allies who failed to stand by them in their time of need, while those who are defeated will have no inclination to harbor you if you did not actively seek their favor with sword in hand. Antiochus ventured into Greece at the behest of the Aetolians, who sought his aid in expelling the Romans. He dispatched emissaries to the Achaeans, who were allied with the Romans, urging them to maintain neutrality. Conversely, the Romans pressed the Achaeans to join their cause. In the Council of the Achaeans, Antiochus's envoy advocated for neutrality, but the Roman representative countered. The notion that your state would benefit from staying out of our conflict is flawed. By remaining neutral, you risk being disregarded and left to the mercy of the victor. It is a recurring pattern that those who are not your friends will demand your neutrality, while your allies will implore you to take up arms. Indecisive princes, in seeking to avoid immediate peril, often opt for neutrality, leading to their downfall. However, when a prince boldly aligns with one side, if that side emerges victorious, even if they are powerful and hold sway over the prince, they are indebted to him, fostering a bond of friendship. People are rarely so ungrateful as to oppress those who aided them in their triumph. Victories are never so absolute that the victor can disregard justice entirely. On the other hand, if the prince's chosen side loses, they may find refuge and assistance from them, becoming comrades in the pursuit of future opportunities. In the second scenario, where the contenders are of such a nature that you have no doubt about the outcome, it is even wiser to form an alliance. By siding with one party and contributing to the downfall of another, who, if wise, would have avoided defeat, you position yourself in a position of control over the victor, who inevitably prevails with your aid. It's crucial for a prince to avoid forming alliances with entities more powerful than themselves for the purpose of attacking others, unless compelled by necessity, as mentioned earlier. This is because, if victorious, you become subject to their discretion, and princes should strive to avoid such vulnerability. For instance, the Venetians aligning with France against the Duke of Milan led to their downfall, a calamity that could have been prevented. However, in cases where avoidance is impossible, such as when the Florentines faced armies sent by the Pope in Spain to attack Lombardy, the prince should, for the aforementioned reasons, support one of the parties. Governments should never assume that they can choose entirely safe courses of action. Instead, they should anticipate having to make decisions fraught with uncertainty. In ordinary affairs, avoiding one problem often means encountering another. Prudence lies in discerning the nature of these troubles and, when faced with a choice, opting for the lesser evil. A prince should demonstrate support for talent and honor those skilled in every field. Simultaneously, he should encourage citizens to pursue their professions peacefully, whether in commerce, agriculture, or any other pursuit. Citizens should not fear losing their possessions or facing heavy taxes for engaging in these endeavors. Instead, the prince should offer rewards to those who seek to enhance their city or state through such actions. Moreover, the prince should organize festivals and events for the enjoyment of the people at suitable times throughout the year. Recognizing that every city is comprised of guilds or societies, the prince should hold these groups in high regard. Occasionally, he should engage with them and exemplify courtesy and generosity, while always maintaining the dignity of his position, which he must never compromise. Chapter 22. The selection of servants holds significant importance for a prince, as their quality reflects upon his discernment. The first impression one forms of a prince and his intellect is often shaped by observing those in his inner circle. If these individuals are competent and loyal, the prince is deemed wise, for he has shown an ability to recognize talent and maintain loyalty. Conversely, if his servants are lacking, it reflects poorly on his judgment. Take, for instance, Messer Antonio de Venafro, the servant of Pandolfo Petrucci, Prince of Siena. Anyone acquainted with Venafro's capabilities would consider Pandolfo to be clever for choosing him. There exist three classes of intellect: those who comprehend independently, those who grasp what others comprehend, and those who comprehend neither by themselves nor by the guidance of others. The first is the most superior, the second commendable, and the third useless. Thus, even if Pandolfo did not possess original insight, his ability to discern good from bad in his servant placed him in the second category. By recognizing his servant's strengths and weaknesses, Pandolfo ensured honesty and reliability. A reliable test for a prince to evaluate his servant is to observe whether the servant prioritizes his own interests over the prince's. If the servant constantly seeks personal gain, he cannot be trusted. A faithful servant must prioritize the prince's welfare above his own and refrain from meddling in matters unrelated to the prince's concerns. To maintain the servant's integrity, the prince should treat him with respect, provide opportunities for enrichment, show kindness, and share both honors and responsibilities. Simultaneously, the prince should demonstrate that the servant cannot thrive independently, preventing him from becoming overly ambitious or greedy. When both servants and princes adopt these dispositions, mutual trust can flourish. However, if this dynamic is lacking, the outcome will inevitably be disastrous for one or both parties. Chapter 23. I must address another critical aspect of this topic, as it poses a danger from which princes struggle to protect themselves unless they exercise great caution and discernment. This danger pertains to flatterers, who abound in courts due to people's self-importance and their susceptibility to deception in their own affairs. Princes find it challenging to defend against this pest, and if they attempt to do so, they risk falling into contempt. The only way to guard against flatterers is to make it known that hearing the truth does not offend you. However, when everyone feels free to speak the truth, respect for you diminishes. Hence, a wise prince should pursue a middle path by selecting wise advisors in his realm and granting them the freedom to speak truthfully, but only when asked, and only on matters of inquiry. He should solicit their opinions on everything, listen attentively, and then draw his own conclusions. With these counselors, he should foster an environment where speaking freely is rewarded with preference. Outside of this circle, he should listen to no one, remain steadfast in his decisions, and execute his plans resolutely. Any prince who acts otherwise risks being manipulated by flatterers or swayed by fluctuating opinions, leading to contempt. To illustrate this point with a modern example, consider Fra Luca, an advisor to Maximilian, the current emperor. Speaking of His Majesty, Fra Luca remarked that although the emperor consulted with no one, he never achieved his desired outcomes. This failure stemmed from his practice of secrecy. He kept his plans to himself and sought no input. However, once his intentions became known, they encountered opposition from those around him, causing him to waver. Consequently, his actions became inconsistent, and no one could discern his true intentions or rely on his decisions. Hence, a prince should always seek counsel, but only when he desires it, not when others insist. He should discourage unsolicited advice, yet remain a diligent seeker of knowledge. When he asks, he should listen patiently and attentively. If he discovers that someone has misled him, he should make his displeasure known. Some may argue that a prince appears wise only because of his advisors, but this notion is misguided. It's an undeniable truth that a prince lacking wisdom will not heed good advice unless he has surrendered his affairs entirely to a prudent advisor. However, such governance would not last, as the advisor would eventually seize control. Moreover, if an experienced prince seeks counsel from multiple sources, he risks receiving conflicting advice and struggles to reconcile them. Each advisor may prioritize their own interests, making it difficult for the prince to maintain control or discern the truth. Without constraint, people will invariably deceive you. Therefore, it must be understood that good counsel originates from the wisdom of the prince, not the other way around. Chapter 24. Following the previous recommendations, diligently applied, will empower a new prince to establish himself firmly, making him more secure and steadfast in his rule than if he had long occupied the throne. Actions of a new prince undergo intense scrutiny compared to those of an inherited ruler. When a new prince demonstrates competence, they attract more supporters and forge stronger bonds than mere ancestral lineage. People are drawn to present achievements rather than past glories. If the present is favorable, they are content and seek no further. A prince who delivers on other fronts will find staunch defenders among his subjects. Thus, it brings double glory to establish a new principality and fortify it with just laws, robust military, reliable allies, and exemplary leadership. Conversely, it is a double disgrace for a born prince to lose his state due to folly. Examining the fallen rulers of Italy in recent times, like the King of Naples and the Duke of Milan, reveals a common flaw: negligence in military matters, as discussed extensively earlier. Additionally, either they faced hostility from the populace or, if they enjoyed popular support, failed to secure the loyalty of the nobility. States with sufficient military strength and political savvy rarely succumb in such circumstances. Philip of Macedon, not the renowned father of Alexander the Great, but the one conquered by Titus Quintius, ruled over a modest territory compared to the vast dominions of Rome and Greece, his adversaries. Yet, possessing martial prowess and political acumen, he rallied the people and secured the loyalty of the nobles, enabling him to withstand their onslaught for many years. Despite losing control over some cities in the end, he managed to retain his kingdom. Therefore, let not our princes blame fortune for the loss of their realms after years of rule, but rather their own complacency. During times of peace, they failed to anticipate change, a common human flaw, neglecting to prepare for the storm amidst the calm. When adversity eventually struck, they contemplated flight instead of defending themselves, naively hoping that the people, disgusted by the conqueror's arrogance, would rise to reinstate them. While this approach may offer a glimmer of hope when all else fails, it is reckless to rely solely on it, forsaking all other strategies. To pin your hopes on someone else's intervention is folly, for such deliverance, if it comes at all, is neither secure nor enduring. True security lies in relying on your own strength and valor, for only those solutions that depend on yourself are trustworthy, certain, and lasting. Chapter 25. I'm familiar with the prevailing belief among many that the world's affairs are governed by a combination of luck and divine will, beyond the influence of human wisdom. They argue that striving in worldly matters is futile, advocating instead for a passive acceptance of whatever fate brings. This notion has gained traction, especially in light of the unpredictable upheavals witnessed in our times. At times, I find myself swayed by this perspective, contemplating the vast extent of fortune's sway. Yet I refuse to relinquish our capacity for choice. I maintain that while fortune dictates roughly half of our experiences, she still leaves us with some measure of autonomy over the remainder, albeit perhaps a smaller portion. I liken fortune to a mighty river in flood, indiscriminately sweeping away everything in its path. In such moments, resistance seems futile, and all succumb to its force. However, this does not mean that we should resign ourselves to fate. Just as prudent individuals prepare for the eventual retreat of floodwaters with defenses and barriers, so too can we mitigate fortune's impact by anticipating and preparing for her whims. Fortune exerts her influence where resilience is lacking, redirecting her forces to exploit vulnerabilities. It is incumbent upon us to fortify ourselves against her capricious tides, ensuring that her power is contained and her influence moderated when the tide turns. Considerately, the epicenter of these turbulent changes, where the absence of proper defenses has left it vulnerable to the whims of fate. Unlike fortified nations like Germany, Spain, and France, Italy's open landscape offers little resistance to external forces. Had Italy been fortified and defended with the same vigor as its neighbors, the impact of these invasions would have been mitigated, if not altogether averted. This underscores the importance of resilience in the face of fortune's caprices. Zooming in on individual cases, we observe princes who experience swift reversals of fortune, seemingly without any change in their demeanor or character. This phenomenon can be attributed to several factors, as previously discussed. Principally, those who rely solely on fortune are inevitably doomed when it inevitably shifts. Success, therefore, lies in adapting one's actions to the prevailing spirit of the times. Those whose actions align with the zeitgeist are more likely to prosper, while those who resist or fail to recognize the prevailing trends are bound to falter. In the pursuit of common goals such as glory and wealth, individuals employ a variety of approaches. Some proceed cautiously, while others act with haste. Some rely on force, while others employ cunning. Yet, despite these differences, success hinges on whether their methods are in sync with the prevailing ethos. Hence, we often witness divergent paths leading to the same outcome, as well as similar approaches yielding disparate results. This underscores the importance of adapting one's strategies to the ever-changing currents of the times. Changes in fortune often stem from the alignment of times and circumstances with one's approach to governance. If a leader exercises caution and patience, and the prevailing conditions favor such a method, success is virtually assured. However, if circumstances shift and the leader fails to adapt, ruin becomes inevitable. Yet few possess the circumspection necessary to adjust their strategies to changing conditions. Whether due to innate inclinations or past successes reinforcing a particular approach, many are reluctant to deviate from the familiar path, even when it becomes necessary. Consequently, when prudence should give way to boldness, the cautious leader finds himself paralyzed, leading to his downfall. Had he been willing to embrace change, fortune might have smiled upon him. Consider the case of Pope Julius II, renowned for his impetuous nature. In his bold pursuit of objectives, he often found the times and circumstances aligning in his favor, leading to consistent success. Take, for instance, his daring expedition against Bologna, undertaken despite opposition from Venice and Spain. His boldness not only subdued their resistance but also compelled the King of France to lend his support, thereby securing victory where others would have faltered. Julius's impulsive actions achieved what careful planning could not, as hesitation would have led to missed opportunities and eventual failure. While Julius's impetuous approach proved effective during his lifetime, it is worth noting that had circumstances demanded caution, his rigid adherence to his natural inclinations would have spelled his downfall. This illustrates the delicate balance between fortune's fickleness and humanity's steadfastness. When the two are in harmony, success ensues, but discord leads to failure. In conclusion, I advocate for adventurousness over caution, for fortune, akin to a woman, is more easily influenced by boldness than by timidity. History shows that she favors those who dare to seize opportunities with audacity, rather than those who approach her with cold calculation. Thus, she gravitates towards the bold and daring, for they possess the vigor and assertiveness to command her favor. Chapter 26. After thoroughly pondering the themes explored in the preceding discussions and reflecting on whether the current era offers a favorable environment for a new leader, I find myself convinced that seldom has there been a more opportune moment than the present for the emergence of a wise and virtuous prince who could usher in a new era of prosperity and well-being for the people of this land. Just as the captivity of the Israelites showcased the leadership of Moses, the oppression faced by the Persians under the Medes revealed the greatness of Cyrus, and the dispersal of the Athenians highlighted the prowess of Theseus, so too does the current state of affairs in Italy present an unparalleled opportunity to unveil the resilience and fortitude of the Italian spirit. Italy finds itself in a state of unparalleled adversity, more subjugated than the Hebrews, more oppressed than the Persians, and more fragmented than the Athenians. It is a nation without direction, without unity, ravaged, despoiled, and overrun by various forces, subjected to every form of devastation imaginable. Although there have been fleeting moments when it seemed that someone was destined by a higher power to bring about our redemption, it soon became evident, at the pinnacle of their success, that fortune had turned against them. Thus, Italy, languishing as if lifeless, awaits the arrival of one who will heal her wounds, put an end to the pillaging of Lombardy, the exploitation of the kingdom and Tuscany, and cleanse the festering sores that have afflicted her for so long. She fervently beseeches God to send a savior who will liberate her from these injustices and barbaric acts of insolence. Italy stands ready and willing to rally behind a leader, if only someone will step forward to lead the charge. Currently, there is no one in whom Italy can place greater hope than in your illustrious house, renowned for its valor and fortune, blessed by both God and the Church, which now stands as the foremost authority. Your house could serve as the vanguard of this redemption. Achieving this goal will not be arduous if you reflect on the deeds and lives of the individuals I have mentioned. While they were undoubtedly remarkable men, they were still mortal, and each of them faced challenges no more just or straightforward than those of the present day. Moreover, God is no less favorably disposed toward you than he was toward them. We uphold a profound sense of justice, recognizing that war is just when it becomes necessary, and that arms are sanctified when they represent the last resort. Here, there is an unparalleled eagerness to act, and where there is such determination, obstacles cannot be insurmountable if you simply follow the examples I have highlighted. Moreover, consider the remarkable ways in which divine intervention has been demonstrated. Seas have parted, clouds have guided the way, rocks have yielded water, manna has fallen from the heavens, every element has contributed to your advancement. Now it is your turn to play your part. God does not intend to do everything for us, thereby depriving us of our free will and the glory that rightfully belongs to us. It should come as no surprise that none of the aforementioned Italians were able to achieve everything that is expected of your illustrious house. Throughout countless upheavals in Italy and numerous military campaigns, it has often seemed as though martial valor had been depleted. This occurred because the old order of things was flawed, and none of us possessed the insight to forge a new path. Nothing brings greater honor to a person than establishing new laws and ordinances when they themselves are newly ascended. When founded on solid principles and executed with dignity, such reforms will earn respect and admiration. Fortunately, in Italy, there are abundant opportunities to implement such changes in every sphere of life. Here, physical strength abounds in the limbs, yet it falters in the realm of leadership. Take heed of the individual duels and close combat engagements. Observe the Italians' superiority in strength, agility, and cunning. However, when it comes to organized armies, they fall short, and this deficiency stems entirely from inadequate leadership. Those who possess the capability are not inclined to obey, each believing themselves to be the most knowledgeable. Without any one figure emerging as markedly superior in valor or fortune, others are unwilling to defer to them. Consequently, over the past 2 decades of incessant warfare, whenever there has been an army composed entirely of Italians, it has consistently underperformed. The evidence of this lies in the battles of Il Taro, Alessandria, Capua, Genoa, Vaila, Bologna, and Mestre. Therefore, if your illustrious house aims to emulate the remarkable individuals who have brought redemption to their country, it is imperative, above all else, to establish your own armed forces. There can be no soldiers more faithful, loyal, or proficient than your own countrymen. While individually they may be competent, together they will excel, particularly when led by their prince, honored by him, and supported at his expense. Thus, it is essential to equip yourself with such forces, ensuring that you can rely on Italian valor to defend against foreign threats. Although the Swiss and Spanish infantry are often regarded as formidable, they both possess a critical flaw that a third order could exploit to oppose and potentially overthrow them. The Spaniards are vulnerable to cavalry charges, while the Switzers fear infantry when engaged in close combat. This weakness has been demonstrated in various conflicts. The Spaniards struggle against French cavalry, and the Switzers are defeated by Spanish infantry. While the evidence may not be conclusive, there were indications of this at the Battle of Ravenna, where Spanish infantry faced off against German battalions employing similar tactics to the Switzers. The Spaniards, using their agility and shields, maneuvered past the Germans' pikes, rendering them helpless until cavalry support arrived. By understanding these weaknesses, it is possible to devise a new infantry formation that can withstand cavalry charges and confront infantry without fear, building upon existing tactics rather than creating an entirely new order of arms. Such innovations garner reputation and power for a new prince. This presents an opportunity for Italy to finally see its liberator emerge. The reception would be one of immense love, particularly in provinces ravaged by foreign invasions, where there is a deep thirst for revenge, unwavering faith, and profound devotion. Who would dare oppose such a liberator? What door would remain closed to him? No envy could hinder his progress, and every Italian would offer him homage. The people long to rid themselves of foreign domination, and your illustrious house has the chance to take up this noble cause with the courage and hope that drive all just endeavors. Under your standard,